Welcome everyone to our semifinal round for the Final Fantasy VI Worlds Collide Battle Royale tournament. This is our round of all of our pod winners. Each week, we had individual pods of people running where the lowest time was eliminated, and last week was the last round of those pods, and we now have those winners, these 7 runners, going at it. I am one of your commentators, Seto Kaiba.
And I'm the other guy, Double Down here.
And welcome. Joining us, we have Ceiling Cat and Swans, both tracking. As you all will shortly see, we will be showing all 7 runners, and therefore, I believe this might be the first time in Worlds Collide history that we have 2 trackers working very hard tonight to keep you guys updated. And then we also have Saberwolf with the restream, and also with all of the different graphics and overlays that you will see throughout this stream. So major shout out to him. Give him a follow for all of his hard work.
Cito, this is the biggest Final Fantasy VI Worlds Collide event we've ever seen. This is history being made. A scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you?
I'm really excited, really nervous to be calling this because there's gonna be a lot of action. Things are gonna be going fast. Obviously, these are some of our best runners. These are our top 7 in the tournament. Obviously, they're gonna be moving fast already. If it was a 1v1 race, there would be things that everyone's gonna be missing. And with 7, there's just gonna be a lot of action, a lot of craziness. So stick with us. We're gonna have a lot of fun. This is gonna be great. And I think we're ready to do some racer introductions. We have a little introduction for each racer. If the truck wants to cue that up. Yep.
So I guess we're starting off with Fantastidon, who he came out of the Ultros pod. Now, Fantastidon entered this event 3rd overall in that play-in round at the very start. Came through the Ultros pod, beat out the Schwantz, Edgeworth, Mark, Holgart, and he did it all in 8 hours, 13 minutes, and 55 seconds total across the entire event.
Our next runner is Dr. DT, coming out of the Poltergeist, aka the Spicy Chicken pod. Dr. DT was ranked 16th seed overall, and had a total time of 8 hours, 31 minutes, and 25 seconds, beating out JS, bunch of numbers, A Silverthorn, Sid, and WR Jones.
From the Goddess pod, we have Hash Malum taking a break from hexing people on stream to dominate the competition from the Goddess pod. Came in at the 11th seed overall, and in 7 hours and 38 seconds total, 7 hours and 38 minutes total, he defeated Sentient Flatbread, Lunar Chimera, Boo, and Drulith.
Next up, we have Green Monkey from the Doom pod. Green Monkey was the 12th seed overall in our qualifiers, and enters this round at a combined time of 8 hours, 12 minutes, and 43 seconds, beating Hefe, my fellow commentator, Double Down, Flurry 14, and Javinator. Green Monkey's also one of 2 upsets from last round, toppling the frontrunner Javinator in his pod.
out of the Guardian pod. Doesn't he? Second seed overall. Came in at the top and has not stopped since. In a very, very brisk 6 hours and 49 minutes, he has managed to beat out... oh, did I skip one? Yeah, I skipped one. Anyway, you know what? We'll do Destiny. Beat out Amelas, Destin Ferota, Zenobian, and Ficta.
Yeah, we can cue Zelfer back up. Zelfer came from the Inferno pod, coming in at the 8th seed overall, the qualifier, getting through these rounds with a total time of 7 hours, 27 minutes, and 23 seconds. Beating Lizerbean, Dust Lamon, and myself, Seto Kaiba, therefore coming from, obviously, the best pod of all the pods.
Seto, you told me you were undefeated before we started this. Finally, last but not least, Kilbasiago out of the illustrious Toilet Atma pod. 6th seed overall, and in 8 hours and 15 minutes, he managed to beat out some stiff competition in Markopolis, Lenophis, Katoisism, and Jolly Green Ray. A tour de force from all of these competitors, and I think we can all see that this is going to be a pretty tight race here tonight. I don't think we're going to see too many easy wins being coughed up this time.
No, we have a good mixture of runners here. We have some kind of, some newer runners such as Hash and Dr. DT, plus some of our tournament staples. We have, previous winners Dozen, Zelfer, and Kel also in the mix. So this is really exciting to see, who's going to continue on. Are we going to see some new upsets? We're going to see some new runners in the semifinals. I personally can't wait, and I think we're going to be ready to start in a minute. Just waiting on word from our truck on when the runners are queued up. But before we start, Double Down, did you want to give an overview on these the flags for this round?
Yeah, let's talk about the flags a little bit. So obviously, if those of you who've been following Battle Royale to now, pretty familiar with it. We're looking to recruit 6 characters and 9 espers to get to Final Kefka. There is a skip. There's a skip. As long as you recruit 9 characters or find 12 espers, you get to skip Inferno. You get to skip a 4.5 minute walk of shame. You get to go right to the switches. Now, we do have a few bonus objectives floating around. We have the Dragoon set. Get yourself all you need to be the next Kane Highwind. All you've got to do is set that Zozo clock. There's a lot of honest people in Zozo you can talk to, and they're going to tell you exactly what you need to know to get there. We also have an Illumina floating around. You have to do some fun, exciting checks that everybody likes doing. You've got to do 3 of the Fanax Tower, the Leet River, the Opera House Disruption. You've got to ride the Phantom Train, and you've got to plumb the treasures of the Phoenix Cave. Of course, we also have to worry. Every time you fight those first 2 dragons, the dragon levels are going to go up. And people are trying to get a couple cheap espers by going to the auction house or going to the Zen Thief. That's going to spike some levels as well. So you've got to be really careful trying to get those easy ones. And then, of course, compared to previous weeks, we're seeing a little bit tighter of an opening, less starting gold, no more of this multi-summon stuff. We're in the big leagues now, and there's no easy wins for these racers.
Yeah, in particular this week compared to 2 weeks ago, the biggest changes involve our checks, our progression. We have no free progression on, which eliminates about, I think it's either 7 or 8 checks that are the quickest checks in the game. Now do not give characters or espers. Furthermore, these checks will also increase progress, even though increase scaling based off progress, even though they are not giving progress themselves, which really changes up how our runners are going to approach this. They have to really change a lot of their opening strategies, given these. But we are off. We have a Yumaro Gao Strago check. I saw health on someone, and of course Yumaro has no Yumaro has no abilities, but it looks like almost everyone's electing to go with Narsh first. Pretty safe early start. With how shops are now they are now tiered random, and therefore how our runners approach the early game with how they're checking for shops can be a lot different than you might have seen in the early rounds.
Yeah, it's a big difference, and I'm surprised to see everybody go the exact same way. Now, of course, from here, we're going to have some interesting options. Obviously, between Gao, Strago, both of those have a couple early checks that we might see people go to get some fixed encounters in early. And also, there's a Yeti. I'm not sure that we'll be seeing too many Yeti checks early on. The cave is it's a bit of a hike up there and a whole world away from where our runners are right now. But I think it'll be interesting to see where people go from the snowy town of Narshir.
Yeah, definitely interesting start. Yeti leaned to only one check, and of course, offensively being very limited early is going to probably be overall a handicap for our runners. And Strago, in my opinion, has the worst checks in the entire game. But Gal really works well early. You know, our runners have all found dried meat in this first shop here, and they can easily, as 3 characters, route and go into the Velt, and then doing Serpent's Trench very easy. Get those levels before we get any scaling would be kind of how I would approach it, and be able to get 2 checks in very quickly. So I'll be curious to see where that kind of leads, and if neither of those are a character, are we going to see some of the bad Strago checks kind of early on, and seeing what our runners decide will be very interesting.
As we're seeing some people go to the Returner's hideout, and one check on the Narsh monster in a box, finding a simple, calm, quiet Lobo. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see where things go from here. Now, it's a little lighter on offense. I did notice that we've got health and we've got GP rain. Those are not exactly offensive powerhouse abilities, so it'll be interesting to see if our racers sort of temper their intro. And I don't know that we'll see too many big, bold starts of people trying to go slay a dragon first thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to see health early because now you know that late game you have that little, that little bit to fall back on. But our runners really going to be trying to look for some sort of offense early, whether it is lucking into a good Esper or maybe trying to find, something in a chest that can maybe get them through some of these first few fights. Because I do agree that it's great with scaling starting as low as it is. But if you don't have the options to be able to beat them, you might find yourself to be a little pressed with options after enemies get a few levels on them.
Exactly, and with 2.5 scaling, bosses scale fast. And, you want to stay ahead of that wave of scaling, or else you can start falling behind and start really getting into situations where even if you're not getting outright destroyed by a boss, you might be spending a lot more time on that than you'd really like. And we do see somebody has finally deviated from the plan while everybody else is looting. Kielbasiago has gone to the Velt. He's encountered that single Lobo. Lobo's the only fight in his random encounter rotation, and he's picked up the masked man, the Shadow.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. You can see him instantly go to Gal's father's house and going to be doing a save here. This is a strat I've seen him talk about before, which is since all checks will increase progress, saving beforehand. If you don't like the item you got, you can reset out. He found a Thunder Shield, which is a pretty good item, but not game breaking. But I guess he decided that it is worth the 2.5 level progress increase by grabbing it, and I'm curious to see how that's going to play out for him. Thunder Shield does teach Bolt 2 and is really great defensively, and more importantly can be used to maybe clear out one of these early bosses very quickly, maybe giving you an edge by defeating a hard boss early on.
That's true, and we saw that strategy work out really well last week. I believe it was Green Monkey and Javinator in that race, where we saw the early shield breaks really opening up some options for some early boss kills. So definitely an option that you don't want to put out of your head. You don't want to save that shield just in case you might get those Merton strats later on. An early boss is an early boss.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because now that, like I mentioned before, the Strago checks are not particularly that great, but with Shadow here, we now open up Floating Continent. 4 more fixed battles plus 3 checks, one of which is guaranteed character or Esper, and Kel picking up an Experience Egg in South Figaro. I have not seen what other runners have picked up, but it is, I believe, on the World of Ruin barrel, so that might be a big difference maker if not every runner happens to check that barrel in that world.
Yeah, it looks like we're seeing quite a number now of experience eggs getting picked up, so it looks like the eggs are going to be hatching here pretty soon. We're going to start seeing the XP really spike. Now, what I'll be interested to see, and tell me what you think we'll see. You've got an experience egg right now. You've got a pretty limited selection. You've got Strago, you've got Gao, you've got a Yeti, and in some cases we've got Shadow. Where are you putting that experience egg right now?
I haven't seen Shadow's ability, but I would lean towards Shadow because both him and Gal have really good stats, most importantly magic, because that's probably the most versatile stat to invest in early, but Shadow has slightly better equipment. as well, and has that fight command, which Gal doesn't. So you have more of a chance for a Ragnarok or Lumina, Atma Weapon, or Valiant Knife being able to be equipped on him compared to Gal. So I think that is the safe bet, but it is a gamble. You don't know what your end game builds are going to be like yet.
And it looks like Shadow's a blitz user, so definitely the faster he can get there, and I mean, perhaps we could even see, depending on how long this gets drawn out, we might see him get to level 42. We might go see him spend what seems like forever in a cutscene with Duncan to learn the bum rush.
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately the play, right? With a normal run, by the time you get to Kefka's Tower, you're normally in your late 30s. You might get 42 by the time you get to Kefka, and it's not worth warping out at that point. I find it's very hard to get Bum Rush without an experienced egg or a particularly long seed, which these seeds are not. So throwing that on Shadow really increases the odds of getting Bum Rush before Kefka's Tower. I personally would go for it, but it really is going to depend on what equipment and items in Magicite our runners find.
And we are starting to see some deviation here. I think we're starting to see different levels of how much people want to start looting. We've seen a couple trips now to the other South Figaro. So, the South Figaro, the town's so nice, you'll visit it twice sometimes. We've got, I think, a visit down there to World of Balance Zen. We've got some encounters going on for Cabasiago in the basement of South Figaro. So we're even seeing a few more early fights as another Shadow shows up on the Green Monkey squad.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see in a little bit, once we get out of some of these initial checks, whether we see Floating Continent first or Serpent's Trench. I think that's going to be really the first big deviation we see with our runners from a macro routing level. But so far it looks like most people have done South Figaro World of Ruin, but with 7, it's a little hard to tell if everyone has. I'd be curious in the end if any runner didn't, because it seems like that's going to be a big key with that experience egg.
And we do also see now Zelfer is floating around in Tamasa. Now, do we think he's going to go into the famous burning house, the Casa del Fuego? As we also see Hashmallow sitting on the Veld, he could hit the Nikea Trench, which Green Monkey already heading down the Serpent Trench here. So I'm wondering what we're going to see, and if we're going to see any floating continents, as you mentioned.
Burning House could be very interesting here. With Serpent's Trench, that's the obvious go-to. But with a big race like this, being able to throw that Hail Mary and do a check you don't think other people are going to do, hoping that is the key to progress, is a strategy. But it looks like Zelfer just going in there to loot. Thamasa, very good opening town to loot with easy shops and 5 quick items. But he is swinging back to Waterville and Albrook to do a little bit more looting, as Kel seems to be doing Serpent's Trench shortly behind Green Monkey.
Yeah, and it looks like we're not going to have too much of a hard time on the Serpent's Trench, although we might not also be getting very much XP. We're looking at Repo Men and Vaporates. Those are not exactly scary monsters, so some sort of early World of Balance Narsh monsters, but not exactly the ones who are going to get you a lot of quick levels.
Now, they'll get you maybe to level 3 or 4, but after that, they're not even worth the time. Running away even isn't really worth the time with it. But next one's a Naughty, which a little bit more experience if I remember. I don't have every enemy in the game memorized, but I did not see what it gave though. But yeah, this pool is going to be interesting. We're seeing Hash and Dr. DT, and I think Fantastidon also heading in here now, whereas doesn't make an interesting play going up to the top of World of Ruin Narsh to do Tritonk and Umaro, and maybe this Dragon.
And what do you think of that play? Because I think, looking at this, if you're looking at a 7-man race, you really want to... I'm wondering, is he thinking about taking this where he's going to zig when everybody else zags, and he's going to try to find an edge by doing a check that there's a lot of confidence that nobody else is going to take? Do you think that's the play here, or do you think it's just a deep passion for visiting the home of a snowman?
Well, with this flag set, dragons start at level 3, so all enemies start a lot lower. So taking a boss without any checks, or taking a dragon without any checks, is pretty smart. I believe dragons either have between 1 and 2k at this level, closer to 1k, and so being able to kill it, get those extra levels, and potentially a good item is definitely a move I've seen runners do in practice, and saw a few people do last round as well. I don't know if I would have done it with the offense we have, but so far it looks like this Red Dragon isn't causing too many problems offensively, so we'll see if he's managed to kind of burst through and take him out.
And I think it'll be interesting to see how many other people go for those early dragons. We did see kind of a high number of elemental shields at the beginning, and I think that really does open up some possibilities to take these early dragons, as we see, in fact, the red dragon go down for Doesn't He? So that'll be a nice, quick early boost for him, and really opening up those options on what checks you want to take and what bosses or longer checks you're comfortable taking without feeling like you might take a loss at the end of a long trip.
Yeah, the other thing to mention is with Zelfer. Zelfer now doing the shadow check while also and we have a Terra with at the end of Serpent's Trench, which is really going to open this seed up a lot routing wise. But Zelfer going to be going in Serpent's Trench in a minute. You have to wonder, he did a little bit more looting and a little more shopping than everyone else, whether that time is going to factor in at all, because at least so far, he is one small step behind everyone else, and I wonder how that's going to play in.
Yeah, it really, I think we're almost looking at the tortoise hare situation here, where is that extra investment in looting, is it going to pay off? It's tough. I do think with the chest, you might see some diminishing returns, and I think it's going to be interesting too now with Terra floating around with Green Monkey. What are the options there? Are we going to see the sealed cave? Are we going to see half the sealed cave in no free progression? There's a lot less incentive to do the whole sealed cave, so do you think we're just going to see a quick check to the basement, or is he going to go all the way through?
Yeah, the Seal Cave, I think, is one of the most interesting questions about this flag set. When I was practicing for last week, it was something I went back and forth on, because the chest density, as we all know, is insane. But we are now at almost the 13-minute mark, and if you go there and you're not getting that check, even if you are getting that check, you're getting no progress, is it worth that time investment? I think popping into at least the base and checking the basement definitely is, but I don't know if going through the entire cave this early after you've already done most of your shopping is quite worth it. But regardless, it's a time investment that's not leading to progress, and that can be pretty rough. So I'm curious to see what runners elect to do it and how much of the Seal Cave they end up doing.
It does look like we've had our first Esper go out. Doesn't has just picked up Stray from the Tritalk encounter. He took out Dullahan and he got rewarded with the little cat Esper. So we have our first piece of progression on the Esper side.
Yeah, and that's the one, one downside of taking an early dragon is you don't get any MP. You get nothing, you have, unless you have more, if you're not getting anything from that MP, and that is the one downside of taking it early. And we'll see if our other runners, when they take their first dragon, how they capitalize on that. Because unlike most seeds, taking every dragon on your way is maybe not a good call. Dragons do also increase progress, and on top of that, increase dragon levels as well. So taking that first dragon, pretty safe, but come your later dragons, it might not be smart to go for number 3, 4, and 5. And seeing how our runners pace the dragons is going to be an interesting decision in this race. Whereas Kel finds a Cyan in Narsh, but runs into the very long Piranha fight for that check.
Yeah, a bit of a time sink there. 5 to 55 seconds of piranhas. Luckily, it looks like Kill won't have to waste too much time. Meanwhile, we do have Doesn't, who's picked up yet another Esper, and will have to fight an abominable snowman to be able to keep it.
And according to chat, he picked up a Minerva down there, which, now that we know Terra's in play, is an extremely good armor to find. We'll see if he ends up finding his way to Serpent's Trench like the rest of our runners. Green Monkey electing to do the Imperial Base basement, picking up a load of treasure. I didn't see if there was anything major there, but electing to not do the full Seal Cave, and now is going to Floating Continent. So we're seeing some crazy route divergence right now.
Yeah, this is exactly what we're looking for, especially when you start getting these characters that open up all these options. The moment you see Terra, the moment you see Cyan, the moment you see Shadow, there's so many possible ways, a lot of answers, and I don't think a lot of wrong answers. I think there's a lot of really viable approaches, and we're seeing a lot of them coming from these racers who are, as we've talked about before, some of the best racers in the game right now.
Yeah, and one important thing to point out that chat mentioned that Doesn't picks up his second Esper in Umaro's Cave, but it is Golem. Golem is one of the most important Espers to find because it is the best protection against calmness for the final boss. And if you wipe during the final boss, that is a 10, 15, 20 minute time loss, and that really can turn things around. Having that insurance to know that you're not going to lose 1 to 2 people outside of your control right before going into Kefka is really good. And Yumaro's check being a little farther away, and now we're seeing Sabins and Cyans and Terras. I'd be very curious to see how many other runners end up down to Yumaro, and whether or not that's going to factor into the final fight or not.
Yeah, really interesting, really comforting, I think, for these runners when you get some of those interesting or important pieces for the final battle early on. You know, it's really, I think there's a bit of sort of a sigh of relief when you get that early golem, or when you get that early siren or mute. As we see now, I think Sabin is down at the Doma siege, so it looks like we're getting some more characters being added to the groups here.
Yeah, and that should give Kel his last character. Yeah, that's character number 6 and plenty of checks to work with, a lot of which are peekable. Meanwhile, Green Monkey finding Brachiosaur up in Flint Continent. Brachiosaur is one of the highest amounts of experience you can find in this game, and being able to get that in at least one fixed encounter and hopefully more is really going to propel him up with experience. And getting ahead of experience in a seed like this can really be beneficial. With dead checks increasing scaling, being able to get that extra level to stay ahead of bosses really can be a big difference maker come Kefka's Tower.
Oh, absolutely. As we see a couple of people more into the Whelk Cave here, I think you're exactly right. And I think sometimes it's really nice to see those monsters early on before the ability scaling goes up. Of course, this is Worlds Collide. As monsters get stronger, the abilities, they're not the abilities you remember seeing in vanilla. So where you might have seen a Fire 2 in vanilla, here later on you're going to start seeing things like Flare Star. So sometimes a lot better to run into these fights early on. Speaking of fights that you don't really love seeing at any given time, Air Force down in Kilbasialgo's screen, and that is sometimes a boss that can give our racers a bit of trouble.
Yeah, especially with that shrapnel wiping everyone there, and Kel's going to take a reset, which is a little costly. He took a few fights there at some of the fixed encounters at Doma, and be curious to see if he goes back and tries that again. No, he's electing to leave, putting back at 6 characters, but he knows that Sabin's there, and that's really important. Having 6 characters at the 18-minute mark, and everyone else having 4 to 5 is really, really crazy, because Kefka Tower skip is a little hard to go to while saving time, but if you're going to end up with extra characters anyway outside of your control, knowing that this early, knowing that you have to aim for espers, can make it so you can aim for the skip and plan it out a little bit better and pace yourself a little bit more. And having something like Sabin early might be worth it. I'd be curious to see if he ends up going back there, even though at the moment he has a lot of choices with Cyan and Terra and Shadow having a lot of checks available to them.
Yeah, and I think the other interesting thing too, with no free progression on, now normally I think if you get all your characters first, you kind of struggle, right? Those peekable checks, they're not so peekable anymore, because a lot of them you're not really able to tell whether it is an Esper or just a pair of Marvel shoes, maybe your 5th, 6th, 7th pair of Marvel shoes, depending on your luck. So I think it'll be interesting to see how these all play out now. With Kilbasialgo going back to Doma, he looks like he might be going back for another taste. Meanwhile, the Burning House looks like it's up, and that's an interesting encounter we're seeing at the Burning House.
That is rough. Siegfried can be part of the fixed encounter pool, and he just takes up so much time. He has his little spiel at the beginning, then he does his 8-slice attack. You hate to see those fixed encounters, because it means there's a chance that each one of these little flames, he's going to be losing, what would you say, 20, 25 seconds to Siegfried's monologuing on each encounter.
Yeah, what an absolute time sink. Brings you back bad memories of that train in vanilla, as we do see Locke showing up on the floating continent. So really tough to find an Esper at this point. Other than Kilbasialgo, I don't think we've seen really any other pieces of Magicite gets distributed here. So, really kind of shaping what this race is going to look like. And I think we're going to see a lot of shortcuts, a lot of statue skips.
I would love to see statue skips. Seeing all these characters, and especially outside of Yumaro, characters that have multiple checks, this route divergence is going to make this race very exciting. And with no free progression, and now knowing that pretty much every runner needs to hunt only for Magicite, is going to make a lot of really interesting routing decisions and a lot of interesting gambles by our runners. I can't wait to kind of see where this ends up. And Green Monkey fighting Gigantos, keep an eye on Green Monkey, everyone. I'll be curious to see whether his experience scaling gets way ahead of everyone else with these Brachiosaurs and Gigantos monster in the boxes that he's finding.
Yeah, two very XP rich. I mean, what's next? A Tyrannosaur for Green Monkey? I'll be interested to see that. Hash Malum not having the trouble that Kabasiago had with Air Force, takes down Air Force. Kabasiago having to do another reset. So some precious time being eaten up as Kabasiago bounces off the Doma Dream, unfortunately.
Now, the question is here, you have 6 characters. Most of our runners, except for Dozen and Fantastidon, have 6 characters, and we know they're going to find more shortly. We know that people like Locke is at the beginning of Floating Continent, so we're probably going to see a lot of runners hit 7 characters potentially. Do you start playing the skip now? I don't think I've ever played it this early in this flag set, but at 21 minutes and having this many, do you just start factoring that in now that is a thing you're just going to end up getting?
I mean, I think that's something you have to consider, right? If the skip, if it's on the way, if you're already halfway there, and rather than take some of these resets, maybe that's the way to go. Now, Kabasiago did warn us ahead of time that he had a special play in mind, and it looks like we're seeing it right now. Is 21 minutes, almost 22 minutes into the seed, Kabasiago, he's going to Kefka's Tower. He says, you know what? Objectives, I don't care. I'm going right to the tower. Now, what's the play here? What's he looking for in Kefka's Tower right now, Seto?
I saw some talk on Discord from him earlier this week. It was more about potential changes that he was coding in, but he was musing about whether or not you fight Toilet Atma. Now that Toilet Atma can, well, it always could. It could always give an item. Sorry, I'm stumbling my words a little bit. But whether or not you sit here and you fight these bosses early, and in Kel's case, he's going and he's going to fight the Inferno Spot. The Inferno Spot does not increase progress at all, but it is a boss. So it is one of the few bosses you'd be fighting this early that will not increase everyone else's scaling. So interesting play. You have to come here and do it later. You're doing it with 4 characters instead of 2, and then maybe go fight a dragon. This is very interesting. It's a kind of a gamble on his part, and I'd be curious to see where it kind of takes him.
Yeah, and I think in a normal seed, really big play. It's almost a shame that we've seen such a fast character lead incentivizing us to take the skip, because the more of that tower he clears out, the less attractive that skip becomes.
Yeah, and that's the other interesting thing. With 6 characters, this play of killing this boss early, you're right, you lose a little of the advantage. If you're doing the skip, it doesn't matter as much if you're trying to take this out. The extra experience is nice. Be able to get the experience out, leveling everything up is great. But with 6 characters, the odds are you're not going to be fighting that Penumbra. And Kel kind of seeing the writing on the wall and deciding to bail out there to try someplace else. Meanwhile, Hash taking out his first dragon, doing the optional Opera House dragon, and Dr. DT climbing up the mountain. So we might see a second person with Golem, and we'll see if he's going to fight this dragon as well.
Yeah, it does look like Zelfer is returning from a trip to Mount Zozo. So again, we're seeing a lot of diversity here in the approach. Some really interesting order of doing things. We've seen a lot of the fixed encounter fights, and we've even seen one person step into the Doma Dream and not come back from it. So, we're seeing a few checks that are giving people some struggles, and I think it's going to be interesting to see now where they go next. As looks like Zelfer has decided not to do the Doma Siege.
Yeah. And that's really interesting for Zelfer, seeing Sabin, and he's probably thinking himself, along with Dr. DT and Hash, being like, where is my first Esper? We're almost at 25. We have enough for all of our characters. Where is this guy? And definitely, you see Zelfer bail out of there, because I don't blame him. Sabin's there. You can come back whenever. Doma Castle is one of the quickest checks in the game. You do not need him right now. You need Espers. Whereas it looks like Green Monkey, I believe, picked up an Esper. I didn't see what was on it, but my tracker tells me that it was something good. There was some good magic on Zone Seek, I believe.
Yeah, it looks like good magic on Zone Seek. It looks like we have a Siren coming from Strago's check in the Burning House. So another great piece of Magicite to pick up early.
Yeah, it's not a character which, maybe Fantastidon was hoping to be something gated behind Burning House, but it is the next best thing. It is an Esper that is a guaranteed utility that your opponents might not have. Mute is very rare, and be able to get Siren, be able to mute tier 2. could be the difference between a wipe or just a big time save, a minute or so time save on that final fight. So that is a big pickup from him. Between that and Golem, I think we're see a lot of very different strategies with some runners come the final Kefka fight.
Absolutely. We're seeing a few more trips now to the floating continent. I think Doesn't already there. Zelfer, Fantastidon heading up there as well as Dr. T picks up that Magicite from the back of World of Ruin Narsh, and it looks like Green Monkey has just finished the long, exciting trip on the floating continent.
Yeah, meanwhile, and we'll see in a second what he has. Meanwhile, we see Hash taking on another dragon. I thought I saw him take... I guess the tracker's been updated. This is his second dragon. He took down Opera House earlier. This is going to be interesting because you don't want to be taking out too many dragons early. They also increase scaling, and if you take too many out, you could find yourself with very strong enemies late game. I know that I personally ran into that, and I'd be curious to kind of see how the scaling ends up factoring in. Whereas Green Money runs into Tritok, not a hard boss, but early on when you don't have a lot of options, your offensive options could be a little weak. Though I do see Fire 2, so that it sounds like it's a non-factor for him.
Yeah, having that Fire 2, great. Also, if you start getting a little scared, Runic also can get some play in this fight. It's one of those kind of iconic Runic fights if you feel like you need that extra defense. Meanwhile, we're seeing more dragon fights, a blue dragon for Hash, a red dragon for Dr. DT. A lot of dragons going on here as Doesn't makes their way through the floating continent. So I think we're starting to see some catching up here. We're starting to see things kind of equal out. And I think we'll probably start seeing people get those second and third Espers pretty quickly, those who have not gotten there yet.
Plus, we're seeing two different Ultrases. We have Ultras 4 and his normal spot followed immediately by an Ultras 2. So I guess he did not like the fact that he lost to you and came back immediately for a round 2. That is always funny to see. And real quick to our viewers, we're having some technical difficulties with Kelbiaso that our Restreamer is trying to sort out. So bear with us as we figure out what's going on with that.
Now, speaking of difficulties, Hash Malum has suffered a defeat at the hands of the Blue Dragon. Looks like Hash is going to just move on, not going to take that fight again. How do you feel about that? Would you go back and roll the dice on it again, or would you just cut your losses and move on with the rest of the check?
Nah, his offense was taking too long with it. Like I said, I think the scaling with it was a mistake, but you weren't speeding through it. I would retry if you felt like you just got hit hard, but you could deal enough damage that a second time maybe would be fine, but he was dealing damage too slow. That's something the smart move. Real quick update for chat coming from our Racers chat. We have a forfeit from Kelbiaso. He, in his words, not finding his footing. I guess he was not happy with his what he was finding in his play. So we are now down to 6 runners, and the reminder that the top 4 move on and everything. So congratulations to Kel. Thank you for the tournament. You played extremely well, and can't wait to see you in the next one.
Wow, yeah, what a shocking development. Kibasiago, one of the toughest competitors we've seen in this tournament, but it just goes to show you, any given seed, you never know what's going to happen, and sometimes things break really wrong. Kibasiago took a big chance. I thought that play into Kefka's Tower was a really next level strat, and I think we might see that affect future races. So even though Kibasiago not in this race anymore, I think the legacy he's left here, I think we're gonna be seeing in future races for sure.
Yeah, and it's tough. Like, I always tell people to, never give up, don't forfeit, because you never know how everyone else is doing. But there's also your own mental, well-being. We're playing this game for fun. If you're not having fun, if you're miserable while you're playing it, if you're frustrated, that is also important. And, ultimately make the best decision, for you, and everything. And we'll see him. He's a strong competitor. He's won tournaments. We'll see him again. We'll see more high-level play from him in the future.
Absolutely will. As we see Hash Malum, meanwhile, fighting some tentacles. So I think this is our second attempt at the Dome of Dream we've seen this time. I think we might see a little deeper of a dive. I also see from our tracker sheet that the floating island, the end of that rewarded a Crusader, and that tracker sheet really helping us out. And that's Ceiling Cat and Schwantz27 are running the tracker for this because it's a group effort running these streams. So a big shout out to those two who are running the tracker. And probably a good time to mention too Saberwolf once again, who's been doing a fantastic job restreaming these overlays. Seto, I don't know how he does it, tracking 7 of these streams at once and somehow making his brand new computer not explode. But as we see some more boss fights of number 128 in the cranes, I don't know how these people do it.
Yeah, and especially shout out to Saberwolf. During the early rounds of the tournament, he was doing a lot of triple duty of restreaming, tracking, and commentating to make sure that while we couldn't get every single pod every single week restreamed, he tried his best within his schedule to make sure that as many were showcased as possible. And did a really great job. And then all the custom graphics you saw earlier, some of the special pop-ups you're seeing of the head-to-head runners that you're seeing a little bit, that's all him. That he spent a lot of time this week working on it. So shout out to him. Send him love in Discord and everything, and all that. Meanwhile, Hash getting through that Tentacle fight. Tentacle can be a little rough early when you don't have the offense available to you. Just because it can take a little bit of time. But I'd be curious to see with our later runners where if they can make up some of that time when they have a little more levels and a little more offense.
Yeah, and it looks like it's the place to be. Hashmalum just picking up Ramu, who not only is an Esper, which, don't even care what spells they teach at this point. If they're a thing in a Magicite, that's something you want to see, but also giving a level 3 spell in Flare. So a few more options there from Ramu, who's opening up that spell list.
Yeah, and so that's the other question. We've been talking a lot about what's currently going on, but one of the great things about Worlds Collide, in my opinion, is our runners are trying to figure out what is going to be going on in the future. More importantly, what is your final build for your characters? What options are you finding, and what can you then pivot to later? And so far, I've not seen a lot of things really stand out as, oh man, this is going to crush later, outside of some of our defensive options like Siren and Golem. Bolt 3, while not a world beater, is maybe the first glimpse into maybe some sort of final build for our runners. Have you noticed any other spells or items that our runners might be eyeing as potential endgame offense?
It's tough because I'm not sure what we're going to see. I think we're going to see some late bloomers. Now, we did see a lot of elemental shields early, which means if we do happen to see one of these many Espers hiding in the woodwork, if one of them has Merton, I think we might see some Merton strats open up. Another sort of, low-key, kind of below-the-radar pick. We've seen a few people in their encounters on the floating continent encounter the Stray Cat, which means if they can find that Rage user, Stray Cat is nothing to mess around with.
That is true. We just saw, I think it was Green Monkey there, just got the Dragoon set from the Zozo clock. A play that we've seen a little bit in the Battle Royale, but not too much. General consensus with runners is that it might be a bit of a time sink, but it is a guaranteed top tier build. Maybe the bottom of the top tier, but definitely a top tier build, especially if someone can equip the spear that you got. Now, we don't have an Egdor or Mog here, and I didn't see yet what spear Green Monkey got, but that is a possibility of something that they can do. And the other thing too is we have Shadow with Blitz, and some of our runners have put experience eggs on them. Bum Rush is in play for late game. Doesn't help you right now, but as a runner, I'd be eyeing that, especially with some of the options that the seed is not giving me at the moment.
Now, speaking of things the seed is giving, Hash Malum running into something you definitely do not want to see later on in the Dome of Dream, the Magi Master. Now, Seto, what is so scary about the Magi Master?
Well, what's scary in the Dome of Dream is that, if you didn't save correctly, you're stuck here. And this is, in my opinion, the hardest boss in the game if you do not have Berserk. This guy, he is hard to hit. He has insane physical defense. He changes his elemental weakness after every single hit, and he just lobbies you with some of the toughest magic in the game. This guy is a jerk. Hash pulling off some great runic strats in order to try to keep it at bay, but he takes a wipe. You hate to see it, but Magi Master is rough. Like, there's just a lot of good offense you have can just be nullified by his high defense or his changing of elemental weaknesses. And he is a wall if you don't have the right loadout. And I hope Hash took a second save outside of the Dream. I do see multiple saves for him, but he is going to take another stab at this.
And I think that might just be the way to do it. I mean, it's tough to walk away, especially when Espers are so scarce. You've already got one from Ramu. He was close, right? It's not like he just immediately got taken out. He's got the runic strats. He might be able to do it with a little RNG and a little, belief. So it'll be interesting to see how the next wave of the Magi Master attack goes. And
I'm
interested to see Dr. DT too, how he deals with this, because the same thing's going to happen there.
Yeah, and the RNG is really kind of the key here. Magi Master has so many different attacks of so many different elements, and you can see that with some of the elemental shields that we have found that Hash can absorb some of them, and it might just come down to trying a few times if you think you have the offense to be able to kind of get by the hope that you get lucky with the attacks he decides to do. He can attack multiple times in a row, so runicking sometimes isn't enough. Sometimes you just, he can... That's how Hash wiped before. He runicked one thing and immediately got hit with another spell before he can do anything. Meanwhile, we're seeing Green Monkey jumping into Kefka's tower early. Similar play as what Kelbiaso did earlier. Do you think he's trying the same strategy that Kel tried?
I think he's trying the exact same strategy. I think it's the new Kelbasiago meta that we're seeing unveil itself right before our eyes.
It's interesting because Zelfer's been trying a new meta throughout this tournament of when he's ready to go in the Kefka's Tower, he puts everyone in Party 4 and fights his boss with the full force, hoping that it's a tricky boss that other runners will stumble over with a party of 2, and that the time save that he gets from beating outweighs him doing a double dive. But we're seeing him take it one step further of doing this early, like I said, hopefully trying to get experience before without counting the scaling to get a little bit ahead. And in Green Monkey's case, with the amount of experience he's gotten so far right now, really could put him in a good snowball.
Yeah, Green Monkey getting a lot of that early XP. We saw him get some really efficient XP fights early on and run into that early lead. Just looking at HP totals, it looks like Green Monkey and Doesn't have some pretty high level characters. So I think there's a chance there to absolutely snowball over. And I think that really sets them up well. In addition, if they end up going to somewhere like the Doma Dream, where they might have more of those tools, more of that high end offense to punch through a wall like Magi Master, which we see Hashmalum on attempt 2. We see Dr. DT still trying to work through on his first pull. Actually, just took him down. So it looks like Dr. DT is not being slowed down by the Magi Master. And that's a big push ahead of Hashmalum on that one.
Yeah, that's a big pickup by Dr. DT, which I think is a good time to sit here and talk about kind of where our standings are. It's hard to tell what runner is in the lead until we get the Kefka's Tower, but we have a rough idea based off of what requirements have been found so far. We have Doesn't at 11, about to pick up his 12th, but it is a character. With Dr. DT at 10 and Hash at 8. Green Monkey also at 10, Zelfer at 9, and Fantastidon at 9. That means all our runners, Doesn't is a little bit ahead when it comes to checks. But with Zelfer about to pick up, I believe, 3 here at Doma, and Hash about to pick up 2, you're going to see that kind of that gap get closed a lot. Because in the second, Hash will only be 1 behind Doesn't in checks. Dr. DT is also only behind by 1. So this is still anyone's race, especially as we've seen some quick checks been done by some runners and not others.
Yeah, and don't forget, we still have that skip waiting in the wings too, so we might see a little bit of a leapfrog there, because that is really, a 4 or 5 minute little skip, especially when you have a boss like Funbaba, who can be a little bit time sink. Funbaba, he's got HP. He's got HP and a big green gut, and I think that can really eat up a lot of time as we see Palador going to Hashmalum, who has broken through the Magi Master wall.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to see his Green Monkey. I would love to ask him in his interview how he ultimately felt about this, because we know that a skip's probably gonna happen for a lot of our characters. A lot of our runners. We have half our runners have 7 characters, and we know what Sabin's still out there in a very easy to get spot. I don't know if necessarily killing Penumbra here and taking that time investment of what, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, is ultimately going to be a huge save overall.
Yeah, it's tough to say, right? When you can already get that save by just getting a couple extra Magicite or characters, but on a seed like this where characters are coming out of the woodwork, it's interesting to see who pivots to that strategy and who kind of sticks with the original plan. Also going to be interesting to see what kind of checks we start seeing for people like Dr. DT and Dozen, where they're starting to finish their characters, and now we see Dr. DT, for instance, trying to peek a check and go into the Velt Cave, also still kind of grabbing some chests. So we saw Dr. DT looting another monster in a box. What do you think they're looking for at this point?
I think at this point, defensive-wise, they're probably okay, but they might just be looking for some of those extra pieces to fill out some of their offense. We haven't seen anything completely game-breaking like Atmo weapons or Luminous pop up. I take that back. There is an Atmo weapon at Mount Zozo, which I don't think Dr. DT's done yet. I have to double-check my tracker sheet if you give me a second. But if, with the Atmo weapon, he could be looking for offerings. He could be looking for, Genji gloves. If there's too many unknowns of what I'm trying to look for, I'm probably better off not looting. But it's just always the hope that maybe the 3 seconds on this chest might be enough to get you over the edge and get you something absolutely game-breaking, and that will break the seat open even more.
That's true. And I mean, we do have, I think, 2 Atmo weapons floating around. I believe Zelfra has one, and I believe also that Hash Malum has an Atmo weapon. So the options are there as we see Realm in the Imperial Encampment. Now, of course, there is one other piece of offense. Green Monkey showed us one that, there's that oft-forgotten objective where you get the Dragoon set from Zozo. But let's not forget, if you do a bunch of everybody's favorite checks, you can get that Illumina. And we have characters who can get there. We've got Strago to get to the Phoenix Tower. We've got Terra to do the Leet River, which who doesn't want to do Elite River? We even have, we've got some of these options to go do these extra checks. Do you think we're going to see anybody ride the Phantom Train, ride the river, and get themselves an Illumina?
I do not think we'll see an Illumina. We have, of the characters we have, you're right, we would have to do the Phantom Train or the Elite River or Fanatics Tower. I think Phantom Train's in play because you can peek it. If it is an Esper, I think you'll see every runner go for it, but there's no reason with these many characters and these many checks to do Elite River, and I would not do Fanatics Tower either. But that is just, my personal take, because I think Elite River is the worst check in the game, and Fanatics Tower is not too far behind.
I mean, let's bear in mind, there could be some people who do Elite River purely for the pleasure of going there. It's picturesque, lovely flowing waters. I think a lot of people really enjoy that. Now, I'm also curious to see with Hash Malum, Realm at this point, we've seen... obviously, commands are shuffled. It's a randomizer, and the randomizer is going to be random. What kind of command do you think we'd want to see on a Realm that would maybe suggest to Hash Malum that Realm, the 10-year-old murder child, should be part of his team?
Shocker throw at this late. I mean, we know we got his capture. That is rough. But that being said, we know that he got Bolt 3 a little bit late. If you weren't happy with your team, I've put in a realm late, even with not a great ability, knowing I could teach her the magic or two I need. But Shocker Throw would really be the big one. Since you have Sword Tech already in Blitz, those are off the table.
Let's not forget about Magitech too. I'm told the Tech Thistle is a decent little attack, as we see Dr. DT scouting Moblies and finding that some little girl does not want them to take Fenrir away. So it looks like Dr. DT is going to go do the Funbaba 3 encounter. Now, is there any risk at this point when you're taking this boss and Moblies? You can only do it with 2 people. Do you see any risk at this point?
It obviously depends on the boss. I used to think this check was very risky, but recently I've been a little more okay with it around this pace in the game. You don't want to do it early in the game, but your characters should all be hopefully coming together and standing on their own a bit, that any combination of 2 characters should be enough to get through it, as long as you're not running into like a Doom Gaze or something pretty horrible. I think it's a good call by Dr. DT. I think its party is solid overall, and that he probably feels confident that with any combination of 2 that he'll probably be able to get through. Meanwhile, we have Zelfra running into that Magi Master, also encountering some of the same problems that we saw earlier with Dr. DT in Hash, it's going to be I'll be very curious to see whether or not he poses more of a problem as scaling gets higher for some of our runners.
And I do also, I think the scaling, it's something that can be very scary. I think these runners have done a pretty good job of staying on top of it. They've had some help. I think a lot of them have encountered Gigantos as well as that Brachiosaurus. So really some good encounters that keep you above it. Now, I want to talk about Green Monkey a bit again, because Green Monkey's been in Kefka's Tower for a few minutes. Obviously, this is not Green Monkey's last trip to the tower. Is Green Monkey getting ahead, or is this starting to take some more time? As a couple bosses have been kind of pre-killed, do we think this is going to keep Green Monkey ahead? Is this time saving now going to be worth it later? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm really curious. It is really a huge, a huge time investment, especially since we know the skips in play. I mean, Hash is grabbing his 9th character right now. I don't really know. Wait a second. Hold on. Wait, how is he even there? He doesn't have enough espers. He shouldn't be able to get through. Right? Isn't the check right before the switches for the espers, or is that the check for the dragons?
So I believe, and I think we're seeing in chat here too, that's those last 3 switches that take you to Kefka so he can do his cutscene. Those are the switches that don't work with the objectives. So potentially you can clear right up and you can clear all those bosses. You just can't fight Kefka himself.
Yeah, so that becomes, I think it comes back to what I said about getting experience without increasing progress, while also killing, blitzing through these bosses with the full strength of your party. It's still a huge time investment. It takes about 4.5 minutes to walk all the way up here, even without fighting fights. But even if you have to skip, now you can basically ignore the entire second party, right? You can just split people 2 and 2 on either side while getting these extra experience. It's definitely a play. I don't know if it's one that I would feel comfortable making at this level, but like we mentioned before, this is a battle royale. It's not about being first. It's about not being last. They know that if they have Discord chat open, they know Kelby also is forfeited. So they know they don't have to be the bottom 2. As long as they're not the bottom 2, that they are good to go. And so maybe doing strategies like this that make your levels a little more comfortable is a good call. In order to make sure that you're not wiping at the end to Kefka or to other strong bosses.
I think you're exactly right. I think so. There's a couple other advantages. So I think it's a pretty risk averse strategy, which I think is the play in a situation like this where you don't need to be in the lead. Now, Green Monkey also did something else very interesting. So I think you're right that it's good to set up for that last push to Kefka's Tower. You can go 2 and 2, but Green Monkey very wisely scouted the other 2 bosses, and it looks like we're going to have some vanilla statues, or some French vanilla statues anyway, at the end of Kefka's Tower. So what does that mean, knowing ahead of time that you might be fighting at least 1, if not 2 or 3 Warring Triad bosses at the end of Kefka's Tower? How would that affect your strategy?
Dude, that's really smart on his part. I wouldn't even have thought about doing that. It is obviously a slight time investment having to just quickly check and warp out. But, we always complain that, oh, I was doing great until I ran into Doomgaze with Party A and I had all my best options were on Party B. Right, I ran the Magi Master, and I didn't have any defense ignoring attacks on with that party. That knowledge is really big, and knowing that it is one of the Triad statues is not as big as knowing it's a Magi Master, but that knowledge is really crucial because it really is going to allow you to come in and confidently take out those bosses, which is the scariest part of the run, in my opinion, is what are my statue bosses when you're not fighting with full strength.
Absolutely. How many times have we seen a promising race start to really go upside down the moment you get there and you fight one of those, either a statue or potentially a Magi Master or a Guardian in one of those slots? Knowing that ahead of time, I think is going to be a big advantage for Green Monkey. And I think really puts Green Monkey in a position not to lose. And I think, again, that's really the goal here. Just don't be in that bottom 3 and you're set.
It's not even about one of the strongest bosses, too. A question comes up often in Discord is, why aren't Espers being used more, Esper summons? And part of it is, there are useful Esper summons if you know what boss you're fighting, but the time save of it is not worth resetting out and fighting the boss again with the right setup. And same with some relics and stuff like that. big example being tentacles is completely neutered if you throw running shoes on people. And it's not worth the reset out, but if you know that ahead of time, that means you could really save time, especially if it's against something like tentacles, walking in with the right setup for that fight and just be able to crush through it immediately. That knowledge, I think, is potentially very underrated.
So what I'm hearing from you is that Green Monkey should be taking that Crusader Esper and summoning. Is that what we're hearing?
Yeah, just keep summoning that. It does extreme, a lot of damage. Just ignore the part about it killing your own side.
Yeah, my understanding is that part is not good. We do see Fantastidon now fighting Atmos Senior, so we're still seeing some fresh looks at some new bosses here. Also seeing Doesn't reviewing their progress down there. So are we seeing kind of a review? Are we seeing Doesn't sort of take stock and decide whether they're going to go do the Illumina quest?
I wonder if it's that or checking, trying to decide if they want to do if they want to be looking for the skip or not, especially going in here where you'd be able to peek ahead of time. Coming back to what we were saying earlier about pace, doesn't really, he was ahead last time we did a count, but his pace has, stayed the same, if not improved, being at a steady 15. It looks like, next we have is Zelfer at 13, and then we have some 12s, and Dr. DT's also at 13, and Green Monkey at a 10. So Doesn't with a really good pace, and everyone else around roughly the same. Green Monkey a little bit behind, but we saw the time investment he had with the tower, so it is a little asterisk by his progress where it's a little bit different with him.
And we do now see Dr. DT also aborting on the Sabin. So Dr. DT looks like committing not to go for the skip, at least not on the character side. And I think that's interesting too. So I think maybe that's another strategy nuance we're seeing here, where some people willing to take a couple extra characters, knowing that it's going to open up more checks, more opportunities to get those espers, and also, as a side effect, you're going to get that skip. So still seeing some more diversity, as I think we just saw another new character. We saw a Moogle get added to a party.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be interesting. I'm looking especially at Hash here, who has enough characters to skip, but still needs 6 whole espers, and that really kind of is going to make things frustrating for him, because if he does any check that doesn't let you peek or easily reset out, and you end up with a character, that is just extra progress, extra scaling that you're not getting anything in return for. At least a dragon, you're getting the benefits of a dragon. He's running a huge risk now with that 9th character, where someone like Zelfer or Doesn't running at 8 right now knows they have the option to sit here and pick up a 9th one easily somewhere else. Zelfer in particular, because he has that Sabin in the back of his mind. He knows he can always pick up Sabin at the end, so he can have a little more leniency if he ends up picking up a character by accident as part of another check.
Absolutely. And now we see Green Monkey getting the Esper from Tritalk, moving ahead to the Yeti Cave to get that one as well. Fantastidon deciding that he's going to spend what feels like minutes and minutes and minutes having Duncan teach the last blitz. Now, Seto, what's important about getting that last blitz? What does the Bum Rush really do?
Yeah, Bum Rush is very interesting. It is very powerful. It is obviously Sabin's ultimate blitz that even if you have a pretty average magic stat, you're looking at doing 5k plus, and if you have a above average or excellent magic stat, you're looking at almost a guaranteed 9999 of defense ignoring non-elemental damage. The downside is twofold though. Threefold. One, this scene takes forever to do. It's close to a minute. 2, inputting the Bum Rush command can take a little bit of time, and that time adds up. And 3, most important, you cannot aim it. So Bum Rush is amazing against single target bosses, but against tier 1 and 2 and part of tier 3, it can show its weakness if the game decides not to be nice and you're just not targeting who you want to target. So very powerful, guaranteed, unlike, say, finding an Illumina somewhere, but it has its disadvantages also.
Absolutely. And how many times have we seen too in these races where you've rolled the dice on some of these random target, single target abilities on tier 1, say, and end up with a quake as a result. So it really is kind of one of those risky plays, but especially on single target bosses, Bum Rush can really, really shave some time off. Unfortunate that it comes so late where you can't use it to clear a lot of checks, but a lot of real opportunity there in the tower, especially for a seed like this where we still, I mean, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen too many bona fide endgame setups other than some level 3 magic.
Yeah, and that's why I would pick it up. We called it at the beginning with the Experience Egg and Shadow with Blitz early. It's a no-brainer. There's not a lot of guarantees here. We have the guaranteed Dragoon set, but the weapon's not guaranteed, and who can equip it isn't guaranteed. You have a guaranteed Illumina, but it's tied behind a lot of really horrible checks. Early on, when you had the Experience Egg and you had Blitz, it was a guaranteed from minute 7 endgame offensive maneuver, and that is very rare Worlds Collide, and you got to run with it if you see it. It's definitely a good call by all of our racers who end up going that route. Dr.
Absolutely. Pulling out whatever the seed gives you and using that. Now, we do see that the pain train has arrived right on schedule. They're keeping the trains running on time in Moblies, and this one is it's really given Doesn't a bit of a headache here. Now, what is it about the ghost train that's becoming such an issue at this stage of the game?
I imagine it's Evil Toot with how Scaled Element works. He can start using this ability called Evil Toot that will sit here and just cause a whole bunch of different status effects. Sometimes it can be just a mute, sometimes it can be 3 or 4 on one person. And when you fight with 2, it can either knock your party out or just cause a big time sink. And it looked like maybe Terra was knocked out for a bit with some status effect. I don't know, it looked like he was stalling on that screen for a tiny bit.
You know, you like to see it end like that as we see a suplex for the kill. I don't think there's any finer way to finish the ghost train than turning it upside down and slamming right on its filthy caboose.
That is exactly how you do it. You know, unless you're a bad person like me who doesn't even know how to do suplex, if you're a true racer like these fine racers are, you know how to do suplex and you pull it out when you see a train. It's just because that is what you have to do as a Worlds Collide runner.
You know, Seto, I wasn't going to expose you as a ghost train pummeler, but if you're going to fess up to it on stream, that's great. As we see Hash Malum doing a pretty late floating continent. Now, I think a lot of racers don't really love going to the floating continent this late. I do see Dr. DT, by the way, picking up a bunch of earrings. Now, what does that mean to get a bunch of earrings at this point?
The earrings, my favorite relic on average. It is the greatest filler relic. Earrings give you a 25% increase in magic, and they stack. So you could equip 2 earrings on, which I guess is technically 4 earring, because earrings is plural. But you could equip 2 sets of earrings on a character to give a 50% increase to magic. And earrings are cheap. If you can find them in relic shops, it is good to buy 4 or 5 of them in order to fill out, the rest of your party, because a lot of abilities in this game are magic based, a lot more than is physical. So it's always good to buy them because they're normally result in a good increase of damage. And with that bum rush, we're gonna see a lot of damage increase because, like I said, it's already doing multiple thousands, and you increase it by 50%, and you're gonna get close to max damage with it.
Yeah, I think we're starting to really see some of the endgame damage setups come together. Now, we still have not seen anybody go back to Kefka's Tower for the second trip. I do think we're going to probably start seeing that pretty soon. It's just a matter of where people are going to find these last few Espers. Now, so where would you be looking at this point?
So, obviously we know where things are, but, with Hash, I think that is a risky but understandable gambit he is doing, where you're hoping that you don't run into any characters here. You have 3 checks, one cannot be a character, and the one at the end is guaranteed a character or an Esper, and then of course the first one could be a character, Esper, or item, with no free progression on, and there are only 2 dead checks in rotation, and if you're Hash, you already found one of them in Mount Zozo. Floating content's not a bad idea. Unfortunately, we know it's lock, and that is just going to be nothing but a dead check for Hash when he finds it. So that would be one of the places I would go. For anyone who hasn't done Dream, that is a very great late game check. 2 bosses for 3 Espers, really, really, really great. But this is one of the problems you run into with no free progression, is that it's great not being able to get those dead checks, but there are just less checks by the time you're near the end that you sometimes feel like you're grasping to try to find the last character or magicite.
And it's such a helpless feeling, isn't it? Where you don't know where you can look, and you start thinking about Kefka and Narsh and all sorts of places that you might have been trying to avoid all this time. Now it's interesting too. We're seeing the Phantom train is being boarded by Doesn't, so he's hopping on the train, and it looks like looks like it's a Magicite hanging down there as well. So be interesting to see if we see any other trips to the train. We're finally starting to see a few more of these novel checks. Also, we see Dr. DT and Daryl's Tomb, another place that we've not seen visited yet.
Yeah, I think Phantom Train gets a bad rep. I think that being able to peek at the very beginning is immensely powerful, and I think that it's not a particularly long check if you don't go inside and just quickly run through it. Be able to see at the very beginning is really strong compared to, say, the next tower with Green Monkey's doing, which is multiple minutes, or even Daryl's Tomb, like Dr. DT, which, if you get all the way to the end and you see it as a character, you did spend a minute and a half going all that way for nothing. At least with Phantom Train, you know at the very beginning what you're getting. And if you're doesn't, and you see that 9th Esper, you know this is worth the time, the deal.
Absolutely. It's that sort of knowing up front, and I think that's almost the challenge with that Hash Malum might be facing at this point, where with the floating continent, you're so committed. By the time you find out even that first check, the moment you find out that it's locked sitting there waiting for you, you've already fought 2 bosses, you've already fought 3 fixed encounters. So it looks like Hash Malum is carrying on and continuing with the check, but that's a tough find at that point.
I think at this point you have to, and it's not even the sunk cost fallacy. I think it wasn't fully broken down, and I want to do it at some point. But Kel had a Google Doc of times for the longer checks, but also broke it down not only the time for the check, but the time on a per check basis. And for something floating continent, the time it takes to do the first check is really not that great compared to a lot of other checks in the game. When you factor in all 3 and how long it takes to go through and do all 3, it ends up coming out to be rather decent. And so you're already here, you have to go and see it through the end, because it is a better time investment per check than it would be if you bailed out right now and try to go someplace else.
Yeah, really almost the opposite of something like the Magitech Factory, where you don't have that upfront investment, and a lot of the time it is sort of the correct choice to get the heck out of there. Meanwhile, we're seeing Doomgaze, who we've not seen yet, show up in the Phantom Force. Fortunately for Doesn't, not dealing with any sort of level 5 multiple nonsense, so getting away with that one. Fantastidon now doing Kefka at Narsh. So we're still seeing some really interesting. Green Monkey now fighting Stooges on the Fanatics Tower. So interesting that this late in the game we're seeing so many new novel checks, that a lot of still kind of deviation and diversity in the checks that we're seeing explored here.
Yeah, and this is what you want to see in a race like this. We called it at the beginning when we started seeing the Sabins and the Cyans and the Shadows and Terrors flying around. You want to see route divergence, because you want to be able to look at it afterwards and for the runners to say, oh, you checked there and you found this? Oh, I checked here and I found that. Whether it was running into a tough fight that other people didn't have to do, whether it was getting 10 characters instead of 9, whether it was finding an Illumina that other people didn't. Route divergence results in fun races for everyone to watch. Maybe not always fun for the runners, but for us watching, this is exhilarating, this is fun. You would hate to see a seed that was a Mog, Umaro, Go-Go, Strago, like initial characters, because we would all be rather bored at this point. It's exciting. We don't know how this routing is going to play out in the end.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, as much as everybody loves seeing Go-Go and Umaro off the top, I think we've added a really, really interesting exploration of all the different ways you can go in a seed like this. I think, we've got 7 top racers taking 7 very different approaches. It started pretty similar with some shopping, but by now these have all kind of blossomed into very different directions. I think it's a real testament to sort of the ingenuity we have from these racers.
Yeah, and one thing to kind of point out, looking down at Doesn't screen, he's doing some good damage to that Doomgaze, but he's spending a little bit fighting it, and that's because at this point, he is 3 characters over, he's a dragon over, I believe he's taken 1 dead check, I should probably actually double check that one, but his scaling's getting kind of high, and now he's going to be going to, Kefka's Tower with a skip, but fighting these bosses with not a full strength of party. Scaling can really creep up with this, 2.5 scaling with these non-progress things increasing bosses as well. And I think that's where you're really going to see whether Green Monkey's strategy really pays out, is whether or not the end of his Kefka's Tower is easy compared to someone like Doesn't's.
I think we're going to see that very soon as we start seeing, I think, Dr. DT heading to the tower now. I believe we've seen at least one other Kefka's Tower open up. So I think we're going to start seeing that pay off soon. It's going to be, again, almost that tortoise and hare to see if Green Monkey's time invested. He's Green Monkey has probably done about half or more of the time that you would normally dedicate to Kefka's Tower. So if Green Monkey can finish up these last few checks quickly, which unfortunately the Dream Stooges are trying to work against him on that plan, but we'll be interested to see whether that time does get made up or not.
Yeah, Dr. DT entering Kefka's Tower right now, but entering normal without the skip, whereas Zelfer and Fantastidon now both have enough for the skip and doesn't as well. We're seeing Zelfer and doesn't doing maybe some last minute selling and biting and stock trading and all that fun stuff. And really, the skip, while good, only gives you a few minutes. When they come in, I don't think Dr. DT is going to be too far behind them, and all it takes is one of those, statue bosses to be mean, or a Kefka tier 2 or 3 to be mean, for this to be a completely different fight. While Hash and Green Monkey are slightly behind, I don't think that, I think that this race is still kind of anyone's game, especially since we just got to figure out the top 4.
Absolutely. I think this could go any way. And I mean, it's funny that it's Hash and Green Monkey up there who are sort of going in an interesting direction right now, because those are the two who last round had big upsets. I think both Hash against Drulith and Green Monkey against Javinator, both coming in against opponents who had won every single week in that pod and managed to dethrone some kings. So, I think we learned last week, don't count these two out. But on the same token, we have some real powerhouses, Zelfer and Doesn't down there, who again both dominated throughout the tournament. So I think we see Doesn't now picking up that last blitz as well. I think it really is a tough competition here, where now that we're seeing some people go to the tower, I think it's going to be very interesting to see who ends up pulling it out on time. Because I mean, we do know that there's at least 2 tough bosses in those last slots in Kefka's Tower, and those can be some very timely and very costly wipes.
Yeah, and shout out to Fantastidon. I feel like with all the talk of Zelfer and Doesn't, who have both previously won tournaments, Fantastidon, who's been around for a while, has been putting up some very good times this seed, and he is now the first in with the skip. So he definitely has the best pace at the moment. He's been putting up some really top tier quality times, and we might see a first place victory out of him with how things are going at the moment.
Absolutely, and that would be a great story to see. I mean, again, we're really, I think this tournament really showing off some of the new fresh talent we've seen. I mean, this is a game that I think the community is growing very quickly, and I think we're seeing some new arrivals to the game who are really changing it up. We're seeing even now, how many runs have we seen, and we still see today things like what Kilbasiago and Green Monkey are doing, really challenging the meta, really making up new strats and finding new ways. Now, we do see Fantastidon fighting the Welk. The Welk, of course, classically a very complex fight, a lot of nuanced strategy. What would you suggest about fighting the Welk in regards to attacking that shell?
I mean, I wish someone, when I was 8 years old, warned me about, what you shouldn't do during then. If there was maybe a soldier or two that would give you some advice about what to do. But in all seriousness, this is actually a little bit of a bad matchup for Fantastidon. Relying on Bum Rush and Sword Tech here, both of which he cannot target, and he is getting unlucky in hitting the shell. The shell is not doing too much damage to him, but that is all time that he's not hitting the head. And this is kind of a little, kind of a time loss here.
A great call out, because that really is sort of that double-edged sword with these strong attacks that can't be single targeted. Shock, another great example, which we haven't seen today, but we always see a lot of discussion about, is Shock great? How great is Shock? But again, when you get into fights like this where you need to be very careful about who you're targeting, Shock, not so handy. And we know that there's at least 3 fights at the end of the game that are those where you need to be very particular about what order you do your fights. Now, Seto, I want to ask you about what Zelfer is doing, because Zelfer has the skip online. The skip is open, and yet Zelfer's taking the long way. What do you think Zelfer's thought process is with that?
Yeah, this is interesting. My guess would be is that he is doing something similar to Green Monkey did, which is he's being a little conservative here. You can only use the skip one time. Pre 1.0, you could repeat the skip multiple times, but here you can only use it one time. So if you take your strongest party, you run them up the middle, you fight the boss like Green Monkey did, you scout the other 2, then you know how to split your party, skip back in, and easily sit there and handle the 2-side statues. if you're 1v1, it might not be the strategy you want to do because it's a little too conservative. But with 6 runners and you just got to get top 4 of 6, not a bad idea, because the last thing you want is to get surprised. You could have a great pace and all it takes is a Doom Gaze that keeps level 5 dooming you or whatever in order to suddenly drop in time to someone who had a lower pace throughout the rest of the run. So that's what my guess is doing the same thing Green Monkey's doing, just being conservative and knowing what you're getting into.
Now we do see for Dozen those early elemental shields coming in handy now, as a lot of these Doom attacks, which could be a problem, bouncing off, getting absorbed. Not so much for Sabin, but for Terra and Locke, a lot of these the value of those elemental shields. Now, looking ahead, Kefka's Tower, we've got the last 4 fights. We've seen some Espers go out. We've seen some of the other abilities. So we've seen things like Siren, Golem. What does that mean for how this fight is going to go? Do we expect to see some smooth Kefka's Tower fights at the end for Final Kefka?
Yeah, I think we're going to see some smooth fights. We saw with Doesn't that he has Golem. I'm checking now to see what all of our runners have. Dr. DT has Fenrir as an example. So give me a second, and I will find some of the rest of these. Fantastidon has Siren, which is going to make tier 2 a lot easier. We have Cleave with a lot of our runners with Sword Tech. Cleave is the only instant death attack in the game that is a always 100% hit, so that's going to cut through tier 1 and 2. As long as our runners have comms protection, this is going to be a clinic of a Final Kefka fight. All the tools are out there, and it's just a matter of whether a runner has found all of them. And if not, I believe every runner at least has some pieces of the puzzle to trivialize some of these fights.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think all the pieces are there. And once again, big shout out to our trackers, Ceiling Cat and Schwantz, who've kept us up to date this whole race on what's going on. I even do see that Ifrit. So Ifrit was floating around with a magic power bonus. I'm curious to see if anybody's leveraged that magic power bonus to really make a potent magic user for the end.
Yeah, I did not get a chance to see. Ifrit, I do not believe, was one of the first Espers, and if you remember, a lot of our runners had problems getting Espers early, and they were taking fights early. So I don't know how much a factor that played in. That's something we should ask in our post-interview, but I don't know how many runners had that option early game. I did just confirm all of our runners do have Golem, though, so all runners have Calmness Protection. And that's a big deal because all it takes is a bad calmness to wipe someone, to cause someone who entered Final Kefka a little bit later to squeak by and pick up the win.
Of course, that does depend on them summoning Golem. I don't want to say names, certainly not me, but sometimes people do forget to cast their calmness protection. So that's, of course, the big test you have to do is remember to use these Espers. Don't be like me, kids. Don't forget to cast your calmness protection. As we see Goddess, Goddess starting to cast some of those scary spells again. We'll be interested to see if Goddess is going to be a roadblock for Fantastidon.
Yeah, Goddess is... really, I think it depends on what level. Early Goddess is horrible, late Goddess is horrible, mid Goddess can be okay, can be not okay. It really depends on how RNG goes, but definitely when you're down 2 party members, Goddess can be really rough. We do have our last party member, last people in KT. Green Monkey coming in normal, not with the skip, but Hash Malam with the skip. Definitely makes this interesting. Everyone's inside KT now. Zelfer, we know, has the skip, but is going the normal. Why doesn't Dr. DT, Fantastidon, and Hash, rounding up the rear of the people who have the skip? Good pace by everyone, but it's weirdly enough really crazy with the strategies Green Monkey and Zelfer did, and with skips and not. This is not as straightforward of the end of Kefka's Tower as we're used to seeing in races sometimes.
No, and we took a very, very convoluted, winding road to get here with some twists and turns from all the different racers. Now, Green Monkey not taking the conventional built-in skip, but he is going to be able to capitalize on that skip that he created himself earlier. So now we're finally going to get to see how much time saving that does get him. Meanwhile, as we sort of anticipated, we are starting to see some of the struggles from these French vanilla statues, where looks like Goddess might be taking down Fantastidon, and that's always tough on dealing with that. Now, how much do you bang your head against these bosses before you kind of break down, warp out, and redo the parties?
Well, one thing that Fantastidon should have at least, I have to go back and look fully at it, but we have seen a Thunder Shield or two pop up. We have Elemental Shields, and while Gauss has a lot of attacks, a good amount of her damage dealing is electric attacks, and so if he has not broken that Thunder Shield, that is a good defensive option. Whereas we just saw Dr. DT break his Thunder Shield, but I do not believe he has fought Goddess yet. So that is one of those cases where you have to wonder whether that is going to be a big regret in a little bit when he fights Goddess, not having that defensive option, whether that's going to be a difference maker. Normally, I'm all in favor of breaking shields. You can't take it with you, but sometimes sometimes you never know what the game's going to throw at you.
Absolutely. As we now see, it looks like Doom might be taking Dr. DT down. It's going to be very close if he can pull this back out. Strago at 37 hit points, and Terra just now getting up with the Phoenix down. Once again, I think we're seeing some of these challenges from these French vanilla statues, and it always brings me back to these racers. Now, I think there's a lot of nuanced strategy in figuring out just when you're ready. I think we've seen some deviation even here of whether people have made a beeline to the tower, or whether they've sort of taken their time and built up that power. How much of a difference do you think we're going to see that making as we come in here to see that prep work ahead of time smoothing the road?
I think that's going to be a big thing for Green Monkey here. He's already caught back up. He knows what one of them is. And I think we're seeing here something that I mentioned briefly before. I know I've ranted about it in my moments of anger, and I'm sure other people have felt this before, is sometimes you feel like with a race, you're like, oh, I sent the wrong person down the wrong path. Of course, how would I have known what that boss is? I had the wrong abilities. If it was a different person here with a different spell or a different weapon or different ability, I could have taken that, and my opponent happened to send the right person, and you feel that frustration. And we're seeing this with all of our runners who are at these final statues. They're having problems with Doom. They're having problems with Goddess. They're wiping. And Green Monkey and Zelfer, they know what at least one of these are. They know what they're getting into, and they have a little more options available to them. And this is a good case of being able to prepare for it. And I'm curious to see how this is going to play out with it, because none of our runners, they don't want to warp out. They know how much of a time loss it is to warp out and try to take one of these out with a different party setup.
Exactly. And normally it hurts a lot to warp out unless you're Zelfer. And I think now we're seeing the Zelfer master plan come through as he's taken those levels that he's earned from his first trip into Kefka's Tower. He's taken those. He can get Bum Rush now. So he's going to warp out, grab that Bum Rush, and he doesn't have to take the long way. There's no walk of shame. He can shortcut because he did not use it during that first trip. So Zelfer, he's been 2 steps ahead maybe this whole time.
Yeah, I need to check to see what his level is, because we just saw a dozen screen and experienced Aegon Shadow, his big Blitz user, and being at level 52. I don't know what level his Blitz user was, but if he was sub 42 and that's what he was going for, then he really double dipped, and it looked like he's 43, so that was the difference maker. Doing this double dip had the extra benefit of being able to pull Bum Rush out where he wouldn't be able to normally if he just went in. Very, very strong on his part. And I wonder if that was by design or if that was a happy accident heroes afterwards, as he is having problems landing in Kefka's Tower. He's trying again. There we go. He got it now.
It's slippery sometimes. It's a very little tower. It's a very big airship. We all have problems like that. I'm not going to judge a person. If you've seen me drive the airship, you know what? This is masterful flying. This guy is. I think Zelfer might be Setzer reborn. So I think. I'm not going to pass judgment on his flying. I am interested to see, we've got almost everybody other than Zelfer fighting warring triad bosses. We don't see this kind of neck and neck action very often, and we've already seen some of these statues amassing a body count. Are we going to see some more people get through these, or are we going to see a few more wipes?
This has me excited. All of our talk about pacing before, of what people were doing, talks of skip, none of that matters right now. Everyone's roughly the same place. They're all struggling with these fights. Some people might have killed a Doom, but no one's gone by a Goddess yet, as far as I've seen. And really shows when you have seeds like this, where you have some options, but you're not given the end game builds. You're not given the Valiant Knife, Gunja Glove offering, level 60, builds, magic power +2 kind of things. You have to really use what you have. You have to know how to use your equipment and your abilities and know how to prep your party with a little bit of stuff you have. And that's really where you're seeing with Zelfer and Green Monkey here really kind of shine, whereas I think our other runners are struggling because their party is okay when all put together, but when you split them and they have to fight these top tier bosses, they can become at very least long and at worst hard. And Zelfer's already through first tier of Doom, and Green Monkey just finishes Doom right now, where Hash and Fantastidon have been struggling on Doom for a few minutes now.
Yeah, that advanced recon for Green Monkey really paying dividends now. There's no question of what party do I take and what do I have to be prepared for. Green Monkey knew exactly what he was getting in for, and it's paid off with a very smooth encounter. He can bring in 2 powerful people well suited to each of these tasks, and it's going to work out great. So I think exactly what you're saying. We're going to see Green Monkey and Zelfer, their kind of measured approach to the tower paying off is now, sure enough, Zelfer just right through Doom.
And you touched on it before, this idea that we've been playing Worlds Collide for a while, and to see this late in a tournament, these different meta being broken out, and by 2 different runners too. I wasn't paying as much attention this week on Discord, so maybe this was a discussion spawn from there, or maybe these are just 2 people that both came to the same conclusion at the same time. But to see such a meta-changing strategy this late, this is why we all still play this game and still race this game, because it's not solved. It's, it's not a solved game, and Dr. DT is the first into Kefka at a 120 pace. He was, I believe, the 3rd into KT with the skip, but he is the first into the boss now.
Wow, Dr. DT made great time, compared to some of the others where there have been a lot of these struggles with statues. Dr. DT is right through there. Of course, nobody's out of it. Green Monkey, Zelfer right on his toes. Doesn't he? Fantastidon's still right there as well. Looks like Hash Malum is leaving and regrouping and coming back in, which, again, a tough choice to make. And I think nobody likes to do that, to have to warp out, rebuild the parties, and go back in. But I think if you can make that choice quickly, I think it sets you up. Now, how do you come to terms with that decision, though? I mean, when do you sort of draw the line and say time to go back in?
It's not easy, and with this, these top tier runners, it's a decision Hash knows might be, the thing that costs them the match. But if you just can't get by Goddess, you don't have a lot of other choices. Like I said, you never know when another runner gets double calmness with a Medio and has to wipe and loses 10-15 minutes on Final Kefka, right? And you'll easily make that difference up by if that happens. And therefore you're never out of it. You don't want to take that time loss, and odds are against you, but you still have to do it. It's better than spending 15-20 minutes beating your head against a wall that it's not going to break down. If he feels like this is the only option he has, then it's a tough pill to swallow, but you have to do what you got to do.
Yeah, tough choice, but I mean it's a strong choice, almost like the times when you see people healing up tier 3 to get out of it. It's one of those heads up plays that you hate to have to make, but really the sign of a good runner to make that call and execute on it quickly. Better to do the right thing than do the wrong thing and take that much longer to decide it. As we see Dr. DT moving through tier 1, and again, as you mentioned earlier, this is where we're seeing some of those pieces of the puzzle really lining up and working to make this a smooth fight. We saw Cleave come out very quickly, take out that firearm. We've even seen an early Fenrir because, of course, as one of our astute trackers has pointed out, not only do we have Fenrir, we have Golems, so you don't have to save Calmness Protection for Calmness. You can use it now and have a much easier time and use those precious actions on doing damage and moving up rather than having to recover, heal HP and use up your consumable items.
Right, especially because we have health, but the only other healing I see is life 2, and I think health was on Strago too, who is not with the final party. So being able to avoid damage is great. Tier 1 can be surprisingly tough. Like if he decides to double hit someone and snipe the wrong person, he does enough damage that even 3k HP isn't always safe. if you have the Fenrir, use it. It is a smart move on tier 1. It is not something you see that often. We do have our second person in Final Kefka, Zelfer, at round 123 enters as Dr. TT moves on to tier 2, instantly cleaves and knocks out tools, making it very easy. And I am checking to see whether or not DT did not get Siren, so I don't think he has Mute to really trivialize this fight. Looks like Fantastidon picked up Siren, and that might be it, actually.
And we're also starting to see the dangers of the aggressive scaling we're seeing in these late Battle Royale seeds. Things like Ultima and Meteor being cast out there, as Green Monkey has been forced once again his second retreat from the tower, and this one not a planned retreat. Now Green Monkey has to do the Walk of Shame, and this can't feel good as Green Monkey does that. Hashmalum in the same boat. Hashmalum, he's used up that skip, and as you mentioned before, this isn't before pre 1.0 time, so that skip's a one-time ticket. Hashmalum already cashed it, so he's now fighting through that Inferno spot on his second trip through. Meanwhile, we still have Zelfer moving on to tier 2 and Dr. DT just about finished tier 2. And again, they've got all the pieces. We're not going to expect any crazy wipes unless tier 3 gets crazy with one of those whirlwind meteor combos. I think we're going to see some fairly smooth fights, so this is a bit of a setback for Green Monkey and Hashmalum.
Yeah, and doesn't enter the final fight at 125. Interesting to note considering his strong pace at the early part of the seed. And with Green Monkey and Hashmalum, when they entered KT later than everyone else did. It took them the longest to get their final requirements. The underdog in me seeing that was very happy that they caught up in pacing, and it is just tough to see with kind of how these goddesses, how these statues work, and we're seeing that with Fantastidon as well, who entered the tower first, and he is still struggling with Doom. I don't even think he's fought Golem yet. I think he's just been struggling with Doom, and so interesting to see that Green Monkey's strategy, which Zelfer used, very well, did not quite work as well for him, and I really want to pick both these runners' brain afterwards. Because it sounds like them and Calbiaso this week try to pioneer the strategy, and I'd be curious to hear some of the thought process and how they felt it worked.
Yeah, a really innovative strategy we saw, and I wonder if this just ended up being a seed that wasn't conducive to it. I think it's a strategy that works very differently if that first boss in Inferno slot is Leader, or if that first boss is Narapa. But I think there's a few bosses you really just don't want to see there, and Big Fat Fumbaba is probably one of them.
Yeah, I mean, he, offensively, not the worst this early on, but he just has a lot of HP, and if you're not running a full party, which I think Hash might be, I think he did beat Doom, right? It was Goddess he was struggling on, so being able to just power through that, is at least something, but it is slow. No matter how you slice it, that HP of Fumbaba is slow. We are seeing Dr. DT move on to tier 3, with this Atmo weapon offering combo and stunner. Girl should not be alive much longer, and like we said, this should be pretty textbook unless we get some bad tier 3 luck, some absurd luck or something.
Yeah, Dr. DT looking pretty safe, and he's the one who kind of took the longest. He had that 8 hours and 31 minutes, so the longest total time of all our racers coming up here, but has snuck into the lead. It looks like Dr. DT is well poised to get out of here first, especially because Doctor has those great offensive options. That quad Atmo weapon from Shadow is doing a good 10,000 per attack or per action. We see Cyan doing almost 8k with his Quadra slices. The flares, there's a lot of damage being thrown out on Dr. DT's team. I think he's probably going to have a pretty capable fight with Kefka.
Yeah, and he doesn't even have a bum rush. It really shows how strong Sword Tech is late game. And, some runners don't like that weapon offering combo because you can't aim it. But he had other tools to overcome that weakness. And at this point, with just Sleep left in Kefka, that weakness isn't even a problem anymore. We are just looking at straight 10k as Calmness goes out and is easily affected by Golem, and Dr. DT is moving on to tier 4.
Absolutely. I mean, I get it. Untargetable abilities, they're not targetable abilities. They're certainly worse. And yet, a Quadra, a 4 times offering Atma weapon, that breaks, and we're seeing it now break that 99 threshold. So if you can get more damage than quad 9s, I mean, you'd be silly to turn your back on an option like that.
Yeah, and like we said, this is pretty textbook, as our other three runners are fight for fourth place, all on Goddess at the moment, and I believe all of them have killed Doom. Don't quote me on that completely, because I am watching, 6 runners like the rest of you are, but this is close for fourth place, and like we said earlier, it doesn't matter if you're first or you're fourth, you move on anyway. And therefore, this is still an exciting race between our other 3 runners, Fantastidon, Hash, and Green Monkey.
Oh, no kidding! This is going to be a tight one. I think we're going to be watching this one right to the end.
Right. Meanwhile, Zelfer moves on to Tier 3, and like we said, should be no problem. Girl's already knocked out. Doesn't on Tier 2. Let me see if I believe he picked up a Siren. I looked up. He did. So this should be a non-issue for him with the instant death. But we are seeing Tiger doing some mean Tiger stuff, but nothing that can't be overcome.
And again, we're seeing Dr. DT's offensive power coming in. It looks like he's even skipped right through Fallen One. And that's usually a pretty good sign that you've got more than enough damage to take down Kefka.
It is. So you do have to be careful. You skip through it and you continue attacking. You do risk counterattacks before the Goner charge happens. But he's at the point, we're breaking shields, we're casting quick. We just saw, 15k between those 2 shields and a quick shadow with swinging that offering. We're going to see time here in a minute, I believe, and all that, making quick work out of it. We have, in a second, I believe, time with him, and that is it. 1:30:35.
Wow.
GG to Dr. DT.
That quick double quad Atma weapon strike. I guess we call that an 8 Atma weapon strike if we're doing quick math there. A quick 20k to take Kefka down. Dr. DT putting on a real masterclass, just really blowing through one of the most seamless final Kefka fights we've seen. Don't think he was ever really in any kind of danger throughout that entire proceeding.
No, and it really shows also, the power or sometimes lack thereof of the skip. He was one of our few runners that played Kefka Sour normal. He didn't scout it through. He didn't run a path through like Zelfer and Green Monkey. He didn't skip it. He did, he ran into the same amount of characters everyone else did early, and he stuck with going in with the least number of checks and end up taking first with it. And I think the big difference maker might have been the scaling, that even though he did not get the skip, his bosses were easier than other people's bosses.
Oh, absolutely. It makes such a difference. I mean, even some of the nuances of just what party comp you end up with at the end can make such a difference. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to Dr. DT making some really heads-up choices, some really intelligent routing. I think we've seen, again, some great diversity in the approaches these racers took. And Dr. DT really, I thought, took a really thoughtful approach. And I think he did spicy chicken pod well, as he is the one who came out of there. And it looks like now we do have our second Kefka Krakow. So Zelfer, not a big surprise that we're seeing Zelfer advance as well. Again, another really well-run race, and another racer we've seen take a lot of wins, and again took a really strong approach to this seed, and it paid off.
Yeah, like we've been raving about, different strategy. It paid off in its own ways. It definitely goes to show that there's not one strategy rule at all. We saw 2 different ones from Dr. DT and Zelfer, and the time difference between them was a little more than a minute. GG's to Zelfer, and with our other runners, we have Doesn't fighting through Tier 3. Got a little mean with some whirlwinds, but shouldn't be a problem. And our other 3 runners, all Tier 1, all entering within a minute of each other for this Kefka. It is going to be quite a fight for fourth place.
Settled. This is exciting. I mean, this really, at this point, is coming down to just pure execution. Everybody, I mean, these are great runners. This has been a long tournament. This isn't, people are new to the game. I don't think any of these racers have the great diagram beside them of what to use on each of the parts of Final Kefka. It's really just raw execution. Equivalent power, I think maybe a couple levels difference here and there. Hashmalum, I think, has a slightly higher level party, but really this just comes down to who can manage the fight the best, and I think it's going to be a really, really tight finish. I can't wait to see who takes this.
Yeah, and we know that Fantastidon has mute, but we know that at least Hash has cleave. And you're right, it comes down to execution. All the things I mentioned about scaling does not matter anymore, but all it takes is a tier 2 to throw some curveballs that you have to stop and heal, or a train you have to deal with that might cost you 30, 40 seconds to recover from, and this can be anyone's match. It might just come down to the RNG Kefka gods.
Now, I do see that it doesn't look like Hashmalum, and unless I missed, did Hashmalum do the cleave, or was he hard fighting both of those arms?
I did not see. I would imagine you would do the cleave, but I could be could be wrong. Maybe it's just a lasting judgment on his part. However, we do have in the waiting room both Dr. DT and Zelfer, and I figure maybe we can bring them in as we watch the end of this race and get their thoughts. So give us a second as we move them into... Oh, here they are. Zelfer and Dr. DT, welcome, and GG.
Hello,
guys.
hello, and thank you.
Yeah, so we have quite a race on our hands. We're going to attempt to interview you and commentate, because if you're not watching stream, you might be able to see in Discord, we have Dozen on tier 4, about to hopefully finish up and grab 3rd place, and we have a 3-way tie for 4th place with everyone on tier 2, and Fantastidon and Green Monkey being almost neck and neck going into tier 2.
Oh, wow.
So
sounds like it is an incredibly close race.
It's been close the whole time, and you two, I think, really were a big part of that. So I guess, why don't we start with you, Dr. DT, since you did dethrone Zelfer, who has not experienced a non-first place finish in this one.
Oh, hush.
Not throwing shade, but Dr. DT, what are your thoughts on that seed? What do you make of what just happened?
I mean, I felt like I was just cruising from the get-go. I think I did something a little bit unorthodox in going up to, like, once I got Terra from Gau's check, I think I went pretty much straight up to do the Welk check, and the reason I did that was to get information on whether it was worth doing Yeti or not. So it was kind of 2-for-1 sort of thing. But then once I got Cyan off of that, I was like, okay, oh boy, I'm off to the races. Cyan with sword tech here, this feeds straight into Cyan's dream. This feeds straight into a ton of great checks, and I just felt like it went super smoothly from there on out.
So
And these experience egg seeds, that's always a breeze.
So my first question to you, because if you go back and watch this, you'll see that routing was all over the place, like you said, because there were so many options. And real quick, we have a GG to Doesn't picking up 3rd place, finishing off tier 4. But you did not go for a skip, and given that this is a seed with a lot of characters early, and I believe you were in the same boat everyone else of having 4, 5, 6 characters early before your first Espers.
Yeah, that's right. 6 characters, no Espers.
And you only ended with 7 characters. It looked like maybe you were purposely trying to not even go for the skip. Walk us through your thought process of your routing involving that.
Yeah, no, I was just I was attempting to so let's see. So I went into Cyan's dream, and it gave me 3 Espers. So I was like, okay, well maybe I can pull out of this without having to get extra characters to open up more skips. I think I peeked Doma Castle, and it was going to give me Sabin, and I decided to reset out of that just because I knew where he was. It was pretty fast to go back and get him if I ended up having 8 characters later on. I ended up taking Setzer later just because Setzer had a couple of really quick checks with Daryl's Tomb and Doomgaze Spot. And that was enough to put me over the end. Though when I did Daryl's Tomb, it said, here lies Ragnarok, and I was like, is this dead, or is this, or is this what I'm looking for? Fortunately, it wasn't what I was looking for, and I was ready to go.
So, go ahead, Double Down.
Oh, I was just going to complain about Here Lies Ragnarok being ambiguous.
Yes.
Now, what was your approach to Kefka's Tower? Because I think we saw some good deviation. What was the thought process on skip versus not skip? Did you ever consider making multiple trips? What was the approach to Kefka's Tower on this one?
So the approach to Kefka's Tower was I had just gotten Atma Weapon from Mount Zozo, and Offering I picked up in Daryl's Tomb. So my goal was build up Shadow, who was my Atma Weapon user, so that he could do a ton of damage. So I stuck him on path 3, where he'd hit 3 bosses, and gave him the experience egg. I put Gao with him because I thought Gao was the weakest of my other 2 characters. I felt like Terra and Cyan could handle themselves, and proved that they could, because we had Natural Doom and Natural Goddess. So yeah, that was a little bit of a nail biter there. I'm looking forward to going back and seeing if anybody else wiped to those, but both Terra and Cyan were down at some point during those fights for me. So, but still, I pulled through. So.
Yeah, that Doom and Goddess, you can go back and watch, but that was everyone's stopping point. Fantastidon entered the tower first with the skip, and he is now fighting, for 4th place right now, because he struggled so much on it. Hash had a warp out, Green Monkey had a warp out, spent a long time with those. And I think that now kicks into what I want to talk about, which is Zelfer. You had an interesting strategy involving Kefka's Tower, and I think we were able to piece some of it together on commentary, but I would love to hear your thought process and your explanation of it.
Alrighty. Alright, what I did on Kefka's Tower was I just sent my full party down past 3, killed the Inferno spot, killed the Dragon, and just sent them up and killed the Guardian spot and the Poltergeist spot. 1, to play it a little safe, and 2, just to keep on racking up those levels. I know I had Sword Tech, I had Jump, and I just wanted as much levels and as much power as possible. So I just wanted to get all the XP and hog it all like a jerk. And that's what I did. And
was it part of your plan to then pivot into Bum Rush afterwards? It seemed to route in very nicely when you warped out.
Yes, I was trying to pay attention to my levels. I was looking at the dragon like, do I need to take you? And I was like, level 39? I was like, yeah, I better take you. Just so I could get Bum Rush and make sure just to completely have that and just have everything for the end.
So we heard in chat that this strategy of sending everyone up all the way up path to the middle path, and then coming back, was something that was tested with Green Monkey and Kel. And we saw both of them do it, but they did it earlier, whereas you did it at the end. If you didn't have the skip, how would that have changed the strategy of yours?
If I didn't have skip, it feels a little worse if you don't have skip. That means you got to rerun everything. That's like a 3.5 minute walk, I think, that you wouldn't have to take normally. So it feels a little worse then. But if you really need power, I don't know what the good alternatives are. Do you take more dragons and raise scaling even more? Do you I don't know. I think it's worth it to eat it, I think.
Real quick, we have our 4th and final finalist for the semifinals. Hash Malam with a 141.44. So Hash, who warped out of Kefka's Tower after skip and had to walk all the way back, managed to come all the way back and grab that 4th place victory. So GG's in chat to Hash, and congratulations, and we'll try to pull him in a little bit. So sorry for interrupting, Zelfer, but that's obviously a huge milestone.
Wow, really, I mean, really showing off the execution there as Hash Malam just plays the fight, and even, manages to hard fight a couple extra arms, hard dodges some calmness, really just, finds a way to win there, as we have now a great semifinal lineup. I mean, Hash Malam, Doesn't He, Zelfer, Dr. DT, wow, that's gonna be a tight one.
Yeah, and sorry, I did not mean to, interrupt Zelfer's explanation of his strategy. Did you end up peeking either the 2 goddess statues when you ran through the first time? Since that's what gave people a lot of trouble, I'm curious if that affected your approach, because it seemed like you were the only runner who did not have a lot of trouble with Goddess or Doom.
I didn't peek them, actually. I didn't even step on the switch to open the pathways for the sideways. I just ran up front. When you gain that much power, I was like, well, I don't think I care too much who's on the sidelines. I'll just split my main party 2 and 2, and 2 people should be able to handle pretty much anything that's in my way. I thought I was going to look like an idiot on stream, and like everything was going to be easy. But then I saw Vanilla Doom, and I was like, huh, okay, well, this makes me feel a little better. And then when I saw Goddess, I was like, okay, now I feel a lot better for doing this. This is all right, hooray.
So, do you think scaling factored in? Because I think the big difference between you, Dr. DT, and you, Zelfer, was scaling. That you had overall 2 less checks, not including dead checks, DT. And I think that factored into getting through that really quickly, whereas everyone who went for skips had a number of levels, that really started becoming a wall this final, Kefka. DT, do you think that was a big advantage, be able to go as lean as possible? And Zelfer, do you think that mattered at all with your strategy of grabbing as much extra experience?
Yeah, well, I mean, that may be. I didn't think about it that way. My plan was just thinking, I don't want to do skip, because if I can get away without doing skip, I feel like that's going to be faster for me. Just because it's, 3 extra checks you got to do. But you're right, that puts me 5 levels lower on my bosses. So yeah, maybe that did help out.
For me, I do purposely try to go as lean as I can normally. When you get your 7th character before any espers and you know where the 8th character is, then oh well, I guess that gets thrown out the window. But I think the going through KT and getting as much power as you can kind of helps to counteract anything like that from happening. So it's kind of like a little bit of a failsafe, I guess, would be a good way to explain it.
And real quick, we have our 5th place. We have Fantastidon 144.41, and Green Monkey gets 6th place at 145.32. So 15-minute difference throughout this race. So GG to our final 2 runners.
Looks like we have another one of our finalists in here too. Looks like Hash Malum.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Going well.
Fourth,
so that was
fourth place. That was nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I mean a bit of an adventure with Kefka's Tower. What did you make of the whole seed there, Hash?
Oh my gosh, so ridiculous! Finding 10 characters. I could not find a Magicite to save my life. I think I was at 6 or 7 characters before I found my first Magicite. So obviously my routing was terrible. But I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll get the skip. And then I get the skip. Goddess punches me in the face. I've got no way to absorb thunder. So I was like, great, I'll just waste the skip, warp out, and redo it. But then I couldn't remember which team could go on the 3rd route. So I kind of split up between 2 and 3 because I knew there was the other boss there too. But it worked.
And I want to say welcome to Doesn't also. Sorry, you get added slightly late. Our 3rd place runner. So GG to you too.
Thank you.
What were your thoughts? Sorry, we're trying to get everyone's thoughts in, and it's already a busy room because there's a lot of runners.
It was a pretty painful seed. I definitely mishandled it by not teaming Cyan though, so it's my fault.
Well, one thing, Dustin, I did want to ask you about before we move on too far. I was really curious about your approach with Umaro, doing the Yeti check early. I think you're one of the few who kind of went in that direction. What was the thought process behind doing the quick Yeti cave?
I had resist gear, and I wanted to take an early boss while they were low scaled. And I can do Yeti cave without adding anything to the belt unless I'm unlucky with the monster in a box.
Definitely good. That's definitely a good strategy. I would not.
I also had flat damage and GP rain, so I could kill whatever came out.
Right, because the dragon has what, about 1.5k HP at that level? Because you're right, it was level 3.
I think I think the highest anything can have is 2.5 thousand.
Yeah, and with GP rain and with tier shop, you're not gonna be spending that money on too much. It's definitely a good call. Walk us through though your Goddess and Doom fight and kind of the adjustments you had to make with both of those.
I mean, the Doom fight was literally just using what I had, which was Pearl, jumping, and swinging. Levels got really high. That was partly because I was intentionally took Burning House to ensure that I was able to get Bum Rush, because that was the only offense that I saw that would work in late game. But they just, when you get your levels high, your physical damage increases quadratically, while your magical damage goes up linearly. And so physical attacks start becoming viable. And so I was just punching Doom, because I didn't have good spells other than Pearl, which stops working halfway. Goddess was the more
really should have done that. Should have gotten Bum Rush.
So Goddess only uses Love Token as a counter to physical attacks and steal. And when you're on your first quick turn, you can't get countered. And Goddess also has extremely high magic defense and extraordinarily low physical defense. And because Strago's level's inflated, he was better off swinging a katana than casting one of his puny tier 2 spells. So I was just quick swing katana and then cast spell. The spells will get countered with lightning, which is no problem with the Thunder Shield. But swinging with the katana was his best way of doing damage, and he had to do it under quick to avoid Love Token.
That is some smart knowledge of the game scripts, because I did not know that about Quick's interaction with the counter, and definitely knowing that and knowing your current offense with your limited party, that is some good knowledge to get by what was a tricky boss for almost all of our runners. Which I think is a good pivot to Fantastidon. GG on the finish. We didn't get a chance to introduce you earlier. And I guess give us your thoughts on how that went and how the end of the race went.
That was fun, mostly. It felt a little bit kind of like a Plando at the end there, with the two statues and statue spots. Because other than that, they're really... I didn't run into any particularly difficult bosses at all until KT, and then it took me 2 attempts on each of the statues to get by them.
Yeah, the end of KT...
But I was also I had Bum Rush and nothing else.
Yeah, the end of KT was very interesting. For a recap for the runners and for our audience, pacing was all over the place going into it, with being very ahead of pacing, but then we had some people with skips and some didn't. We had Green Monkey who ran in Kefka Tower much earlier and killed half of it and came back later. But everyone was fighting the 2 statues around the same time, and it really, those things were enough of a blocker and enough of a time sink with a lot of people that they really were the great equalizer, that pacing didn't matter as much once you kind of hit them. So even wiping twice and having to go through and fighting, say, Doom twice was a really kind of big deal. And I'm sure it sounds like with most of you that your limited offense really started you really started feeling it there, correct?
I ended up the characters I found late, because I did the skip, so my 8th and 9th character ended up being the stars of the statue fights. I had Mog doing Stray Cat Rage on Goddess, doing way more than anything Strago was doing, so Mog pretty much soloed her. And then I had Sabin, who just used the fight command and contributed a few thousand damage to Doom, and that was enough.
Yeah, it was interesting seeing, especially with so many characters early on. I guess, open question for the panel here, but when you've got that many characters with that many options and more than 4 viable paths to go through for picking your party, what's the decision making there like? How are you coming up with that team that's going to get you to the end?
For me, it's usually who do I want to get the most experience on, and who do I think can take a boss solo. And usually those aren't the same person, so that's how I divide things up.
I just try to think less, and I don't know if that's good advice because I came in 5th place, but I think sometimes you can get a little analysis paralysis trying to figure out the perfect party, and sometimes it's just better to stick with what you got.
And I think we saw a lot of that. There's a lot of playing the hand that you're dealt. Interesting too, seeing, so Fantastidon, for instance, encountering Realm and sort of making that choice to not bring Realm along. So I'm curious too, with some of I think we saw some Atmoems coming out, but what's sort of the approach there to making that final decision of the offensive loadout? I think we also saw some Magic Power +1 Espers floating around as well, but was there any ever temptation for anybody to go do, say, get that Illumina from the 3 checks or do the Dragoon set?
Illumina was actually very tempting. I had that in the back of my mind for a lot of it, but I discovered Midwight. Burning House didn't count, and I ended up with just 2 Betty checks that were more reasonable to do.
That would explain your. You spent like a few seconds on the tracking menu when we were trying to figure out what you were looking at, and we figured it was Lumina skip, but I guess you were checking the burning house if it factored into the Lumina check.
I did burning house for both because I thought it went into a Lumina check. It doesn't, but also just to pump up levels though.
And it was not the place to do it.
Well, there were some fights there, and then there was some trolling.
Siegfried's.
I
felt like the early, I mean, maybe some of the other racers had better grinds than I did. I found the early fights very unrewarding. Serpent's Trench was a bunch of dud fights. Burning House was half dud fights.
I just opened Red Dragon.
What's up?
I just opened Red Dragon. Mora cave fights.
Yeah, you were the big. That was the big deviation early on. Everyone else did Velt and Serpent's Trench, where you did that. You did Red Dragon first, and they definitely made the early game interesting, and of course got really interesting once we started having checks open up left, right, center. But yeah, were there anyone else have any other final thoughts or anything about? I felt like this seed in particular was just really crazy, where all of you had so many options going on from a routing perspective and everything. Was there anything routing wise that you wish you maybe had done differently or explored differently?
I didn't need to do the route differently, but had I just grabbed Bum Rush, like was my initial when I put the EXP egg on Shadow, I think he could have easily killed Goddess with Bum Rush, and I'd have saved from having to warp out, go back through. I mean, that would have saved me 5-6 minutes probably. Of course, it takes a minute to do that, but still, if you're spending a minute to save 5, that could have been huge.
I have to ask, where was the XP egg?
It was in one of the South Figueroas.
World of Balance, South Figaro.
In the barrel, the rich man's house.
Yeah, the barrel outside Rich Man's house.
Barrel, I skipped that one.
Yeah, you were the
Every barrel you skip's an Illuminar and experience egg.
I think you're the only one who skipped that one, Zelfer, and that's why. Yeah, that's why you were struggling so hard to get that Bum Rush, and your strategy worked out very well for getting it, but that could have been a big difference maker. Whereas we saw most people throw that on Shadow immediately in order to get that guaranteed endgame offense.
I think we've learned by now that obviously you never stop looting chests. The more chests you get, the more powerful you're going to get. So if you can get up to that 150, 200 chest count, I think you're guaranteed a win. That's a great advice. I think that everybody should take to heart, especially people competing against those of us in the next competition. Loot 200 chests. That's the takeaway here.
There's no looting like looting.
The last thing I want to ask everyone is, what are your thoughts on the Battle Royale so far, especially this flag set? This flag set really changed things up a lot, and I felt like a lot of people found it very fun. But what are your thoughts so far on what we've been kind of playing with over the last few weeks?
I do enjoy how this flag set is high variability. It's not very consistent. If you're getting, it's going to be a gimme, especially in these rounds, like a gimme flag set or kind of rough like this week's or this one. We could have this without the egg.
Fast though. It's usually 90 minutes or less, which is really nice. Without being too easy, like you were saying.
Yeah, I agree with Doesn't. I think the variance is fun. I mean, we've seen, obviously, 117 seeds and 150 seeds. And I think a lot of that just comes down to RNG, which I think makes it fun to race and hopefully fun to watch. I've certainly watched a lot of Battle Royale races the last few weeks.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll be seeing some more. I mean, what's people's thought process? Any hints for some strats we'll be seeing on the next flag set?
Those safety strats. Gain that power.
What's on? Yep, that's gonna be something.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
Kefka Narsh grind. First check. Kefka Narsh grind. Watch it.
Zelfer, with the strategy you kind of showed off here, is that something that when there's less competitors that you might not utilize? Is it maybe a little too conservative?
Oh, next week normalize and distort's on. I think it might be a good idea to be a little more conservative overall. Other than that, I guess I just have to check barrels.
I think the big thing with normalize and distort is you do not want to underlevel. You want to make sure you have a healthy amount of levels and notably HP, because if you go in at like 30 and you didn't have HP boosts, you are prone to just getting wiped from full by Meteo. Unless you have Meteo skip, then you should be fine.
If I play it like I played this one, just going at level 50 or so, I'll be fine. I took 2 Meteos and I didn't care because it didn't even get my characters that low, so...
Well, I think it's going to be a pretty tight race. I think the four of you have been putting on a clinic so far here, and I think next week's going to be pretty interesting to see who comes out of that one unscathed. Any other kind of final thoughts before we close it off for the evening?
I'm just curious what everyone's reaction was when they started the seed and saw it was a Gao Strago Umaro start.
It's a good thing my mic was off.
I mean, I was thinking, what am I doing first? But it was a bad Gao too.
Yeah, I
Gao.
like seeing Gao. I like his start, and he can have 2 good abilities, but that Gao didn't have the best. I mean, GP Rain's great, okay to start, I guess, but
I like a Gao start. I like a Yeti start. Honestly, I saw Strago and I was like, nope, and I did not do any Strago checks for the rest of the seed.
Amen to that.
I didn't do one.
What was on top of the Fanatics Tower? Anyone went?
I have no idea.
No one go.
I did not even.
I was tempted to go there with the Yeti.
Green Monkey went there, but I don't remember what the item was at the top, but it was an Esper at the bottom.
Yeah.
That is my other gripe with this, is the free checks were shields and armor exclusively.
Yeah, I was all decked out for Merton and never found Merton, so...
Appreciate the 3 bombs and the only attack spells I got besides Pearl.
And not a single weapon to be found. I was dragging this useless lock around for like the
Same.
entire game.
Oh, my lock turned out kind of good. I found
I found lock
Dragonhorn
super late.
and an
didn't use
Atma
it.
weapon.
I'm trying to remember where I found my Bolt 3 Esper, because I definitely had Bolt 3 from half of the seed at least.
I found it fairly late, but the Bolt 3 was incredibly helpful. I don't remember where it was, though.
I think Bolt
I
3 was a
had Bolt 3 and
Ramu
Ice 3
spell.
by the end.
Yeah, it
Ice
was on
3 was
Ramu.
very
Was that from...
Ramu was Doma Dream 1.
Oh, Doma, Cyan.
There was also Ice 3 on Starlit, apparently. Who was that? Mog.
Starlet's the one I had. Well, sounds like it's a pretty divergent seed. That's cool.
Yeah.
Like, I never found Realm. I never did Cyan's Dream.
Oh, well, you were lucky not to do Cyan's Dream, because I did that as fast as I could to get Cyan the Sword Text, and then it was, at the end of it, it was Magi Master.
Yeah, thank goodness for Terra's... I think, did Terra have Natural Berserk? She had it for me anyway.
Oh,
I
I
might have
didn't
learned it from
see
something.
Oh,
Berserk.
you had
Some Esper.
Berserk? What?
Yeah.
I used Pummel Sword Tech 1 and GP Rain to kill it, so... While casting Runic.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I did.
You're
Okay.
pulling off
Minus
some.
GP Rain because I hated Cal.
Classic.
You're pulling off some impressive runic timing, by the way, Hash, during that fight.
I was intense. I was... the second time fighting him, I'm like, it's this or I'm out, so... Glad it worked.
Yeah, I just watched Green Monkey stream back. He never actually picked up the item in the chest. He just fought the 3 Stooges and went down to the bottom, which is very interesting because the item in the chest doesn't increase progression. It's only when you beat the boss and then when you get the reward at the bottom. Those are actually 2 different checks. So, for anybody that is curious, you could grab the chest and not increase scaling. So, but yeah, it remains a mystery.
Something I found with all of these Battle Royale seeds, and maybe it's just like observation bias, I find it really hard to put together Dragoon builds. Like, sometimes, in this seed there were a bunch of boots, I never found a horn. I played a bunch of other seeds where I'm just juggling a bunch of horns and never find boots.
That's kind of the case in general.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when you go set the
All
clock.
pieces.
Yeah, there's always the clock.
That's a trap.
I always support my opponents setting the clock.
Green monkey.
Exactly. Me too.
Green monkeys.
That sounds about right.
But I did not see what his spear was that he got for it.
I found a Pearl Lance doing Zozo World of Ruin because I wanted to kill another dragon and figured I'd grab one dead. Well, I forgot it was a dead check, being honest. But then I couldn't kill the blue dragon as he kept throwing water edges, and I had flame and ice shields. So
I know I got one of those somewhere, but Lock can't use it. So it did nothing.
oh, and I found Lock last. I didn't do floating con until way late, so I wasn't worried about trying to make a jumper. I think I did see a Dragonborn in the shop though. World of Ruin Albrook maybe?
Yeah, that
By
sounds
then,
right.
I didn't need it, so
There's full imp gear in shops too.
Wow,
Full
really?
of
I
them in
mean,
Nourish
there was defense for days in this
You
seed.
need the horn. Yeah, this was a
I saw
full
this-
defense seed. Resists were plentiful. Offense was limited.
Well, any other closing comments? I think I think it's a tight race, and I think we've got another one now to get set for next week with the four of you. A really well run race this week, though. Try saying that 3 times fast. Any other comments before we move on and maybe visit in on somebody else in the community?
It's an offering.
Yeah,
in the hour.
GG's to all of you. Thank you so much. Shout out to my spicy chicken pod.
Congrats on the 7-way restream. I can't wait to watch it.
It is chaos in the best way.
all right,
Streams
GG, thanks
colliding.
everybody.
Good night, folks.
GG's.
Bye, guys.
Congratulations
Have a good
to
one.
everyone.
Yeah, stick around. I think
Congratulations,
we're gonna raid Lunar Chimera. So give them a shout out. They are playing some Worlds Collide as they usually do on their Thursday night. Looks like they're doing the Living Seed. So if you haven't done it yet and you want to watch it, spoiler alerts ahead. But we'll go do that now. And thank you, Saberwolf, for putting on the show. You guys for doing commentary, Ceiling Cat for tracking with me, and I guess that's it.
Yeah, huge shout out. Ceiling Cat, Schwantz27, you two both really great job staying on top of that. I think I tried to break your tracking sheet a few times, but you kept it going regardless of my interference. So that was a ton to keep track of. You both did a fantastic job. Hopefully everybody is already following you, but if they're not, follow away. And yeah, Saberwolf, obviously, epic production here that moving mountains to get this going, and some great transitions, and really great. It was awesome race, and I think we had a great team behind it. So all 3 of you, wonderful job. Seto also, great comms. Thanks for carrying me, and really, I think an enjoyable race for everybody.
Yeah, and I want to ditto all those thanks, and thank you, Double Down, for being a great commentator, and thank you to all of our runners, all 7. It was an amazingly fun race. I feel like I say this every time I commentate or restream, that of like, oh, this was one of the best races I've been a part of, but this really was. The end of this was so thrilling, and being able to show all 7 and have some of that production, courtesy of Saberwolf, really made this a special stream. And shout out to everyone in the Battle Royale. I feel like it's been a very fun last few weeks, and everyone's been having a blast. And hopefully those vibes will continue on to the last 2 rounds. And good luck to Doesn't, Zelfer, Dr. DT, and Hash Milan, our 4 winners, moving on to the semifinals.
Yeah, what a great competition so far. I loved competing in it. I've even more loved watching it, and I'm really looking forward to next week. I think it's going to be an exciting one, and I definitely will be missing it.
Either will I, and we encourage everyone to join in, everyone to follow along. It is going to be it's going to be really great, and we get to see the same stuff, just even more horrible with normalizing the distort. So feel free to join us next week. Time TBD. Please join our Discord. We post our events there, and we will, as soon as we get the details from the runners of when they're free, we will make sure there's an event for this race, and you don't want to miss it. So check it out. And you can find all information at ff6wc.com. And with that, I'm Seto Kaiba.
And I'm Double Down.
And I believe we're going to be kicking off to Lunar Chimera running this week's Living Seed. So, like Swan said earlier, spoilers if you have not played it yet. But if you have, or you don't intend on playing it, feel free to join us for the raid, and we'll see you over there.
Take care, everybody.